Chapter 2990. Han Qin and Jiang Ning were very confident in their second young master's safety. However, they did not know that a crisis had quietly arrived. Now, Xiao Man also bravely rushed out, wanting to use this to hone her combat skills. In this way, Xiao Yang did not need to continue demonstrating for Xiao Man to observe. Therefore, he could attack with all his strength and directly kill her in a thunderous manner. Moreover, Xiao Man had very little combat experience and was one realm lower. Even though she had a superb spiritual weapon, she had just obtained it and was not familiar with it. Therefore, she did not have much of an advantage. In this way, it would be full of risks. Xiao Yang wanted to control the situation as soon as possible so that no accidents would happen to Xiao Man. Therefore, he could only solve his two opponents first before he could help Xiao Man unimpeded. After Han Qin and Jiang Ning met up, the two of them seemed to have worked together for many years and were very skilled. With just a glance, they were able to understand each other's thoughts and how they should cooperate next. In the next moment, Han Qin and Jiang Ning also launched attacks from two different directions. Han Qin held a large saber in his hand and rushed at a very fast speed. His aura was also very majestic. Countless saber lights seemed to have materialized. The entire canyon was shaken and constantly shrank. Fortunately, Zhang Xuanji had pulled the battlefield 10 miles away. Otherwise, they would have been more or less affected by each other's attacks, and even their deployment and plans would be disrupted. Jiang Ning, on the other hand, made a gesture with both hands. Although he was rushing forward, his speed was not fast. However, there were countless spiritual powers gathering around him. Obviously, Han Qin's fierce attack was only a pretense used to suppress Xiao Yang. The real killing move was in Jiang Ning's hands. Their cooperation could be said to be flawless. As long as they could drag on like this, the outcome would indeed be determined. However, all of this was not as simple as they had imagined. This was because the opponent they were facing now was Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang only glanced at him coldly. Then he waved the divine sword in his hand and directly slashed at Han Qin. Since Han Qin wanted to attack head-on, there was no harm in clashing with him and directly defeating him. Thundering fire plunder. Following a low shout, two completely different sword cheese of lightning and flame appeared on the divine sword. The sword cheese kept spinning like a whistling hurricane and were unstoppable. Countless saber lights slashed, but they were instantly shattered when they hit the sword cheese, and they canceled each other out. At this moment, Xiao Yang seemed to be unstoppable. His speed was extremely fast, and the sharpness of his aura made people feel that he was unstoppable, causing them to feel terrified. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, had an indifferent look on his face. To him, this was nothing out of the ordinary. At this moment, Han Qin's expression changed. He was even a little frightened. He really found it hard to understand. The strength this guy had displayed before was not so domineering. But why did he change so much in the blink of an eye? This is impossible. Han Qin roared indignantly in his heart. He felt that all of this was a little too strange. He felt that what he saw and what he felt to Yang was twos. This black-robed young man's change is too great. Or was he hiding his strength before? Thinking of this, Han Qin could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. If this was really the case, then he had undoubtedly been tricked. Since things had come to this, Han Qin did not dare to be careless. He could only go all out. Otherwise, he might not be able to keep his life. Han Qin waved the saber in his hand wildly as if he wanted to drain all the power in this spiritual weapon. He seemed to be in a frenzy. The chill in his heart made Han Qin very clear that if he continued to look down on Yang Ling like before, he would definitely pay a huge price. He might not even be able to keep his life. Countless saber lights kept gushing out, but the sword cheese were very tyrannical. They kept crushing the opponent's defense. Xiao Yang's power seemed to be inexhaustible. After the sword cheese in front were shattered, there would be an endless stream of new sword cheese. His momentum did not weaken at all. At this moment, Han Qin's heart was almost filled with despair. Could it be that he really could not escape death today? Han Qin was naturally unwilling. He had spent a lot of effort and suffered a lot of humiliation to be able to get to where he was today. It was not easy for him to endure glory and wealth. How could he just give up here? Break! Han Qin roared and slashed out with all his strength. An extremely tyrannical saber light slashed out. It was like the anger of a god. It was unstoppable. Seeing this, Xiaoyang only snorted coldly. He waved the long sword in his hand. Immediately, countless sword cheese rushed up and directly shattered the saber light as if it was effortless. After seeing this scene, Han Qin's heart became more and more shocked. At the same time, he became somewhat desperate. How could this person's power be so tyrannical? It could even be said that this was simply inconceivable. Han Qin was also someone who did not believe in heresy. He did not want to just wait for death. In the next moment, Han Qin continuously infused his own power into the large saber. After the large saber received the injection of spiritual energy, the patterns on it glowed with a ghostly green light. It looked very strange. However, at this moment, Xiaoyang had arrived and slashed down with the divine sword. The patterns on the large saber continued to expand. In the blink of an eye, it looked like an abyss. The divine sword pierced directly into it. Han Qin laughed loudly. Fortunately, his large saber had some strange techniques. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would not be able to block Xiaoyang's attack. Blood-water nail! At this moment, Jiangning's handprint suddenly paused and suddenly slammed down. Suddenly, a long blood-red nail fell directly on Xiaoyang's back as if it wanted to kill him directly. The long blood-red nail was 3 feet long and looked like it was formed by blood. However, the murderous aura condensed within it were extremely strong. Even the physical body of a martial emperor seemed very small in front of these blood spikes. Once they were hit, they would most likely end up dead without a doubt. Xiaoyang ignored it as if he did not see it. He suddenly exerted force in his hand and countless sword cheese exploded again. He also allowed the long sword to penetrate the abyss-like patterns. Xiaoyang's perception of the battlefield was naturally extraordinary. However, he did not think that his opponent's small tricks would be able to make him afraid. A wave of energy exploded and the large saber in Han Qin's hand suddenly collapsed. Chapter 2991. Han Qin's eyes were filled with shock when he saw the saber in his hand suddenly crumble. He found it hard to believe that what he was seeing was not real. The saber in his hand was a spiritual weapon and was made of 10,000 years black iron. Although it was not indestructible, it was not that easy to destroy. However, at this moment, under the impact of the lightning and fire sword chi, it could not withstand it at all and directly crumbled? Impossible! Han Qin roared in pain and helplessness. He did not dare to believe that what he was seeing was real. He had never expected such a thing to happen. He wanted to use such a method to block Xiaoyang's attack, and even restrict him so that his companions could kill him directly. However, the spiritual weapon in his hand was as fragile as mud and could not withstand a single blow. Han Qin's eyes were filled with disbelief. Until now, he still felt that everything in front of him was not real. There were even fragments of the saber that directly cut Han Qin's skin. In a panic, the divine sword in Xiaoyang's hand directly pierced through his opponent's throat. Xiaoyang seemed to be unaware of the blood-water nail on his back. The danger was quietly approaching. Looking at his partner's warrior, Jiangning was even more furious. He urged the blood-water nail with all his strength, wanting to kill him directly. Seeing the blood-colored nail getting closer and closer to Xiaoyang's back, Jiangning's face became more and more ruthless. He felt that this move was enough to kill Xiaoyang directly. However, ripples suddenly appeared on Xiaoyang's back. The blood-colored nail sank into the ripples, but could not touch Xiaoyang's clothes at all. Seeing the blood-colored nail mysteriously disappear, Jiang Ning's eyes were filled with shock. Although he had seen such methods and magical powers before, he still found it hard to understand what was going on. Xiao Yang's defense seemed to be impenetrable. No matter where the attack came from, he would be able to deal with it in the end. At this moment, Jiang Ning's heart was filled with despair. He and Han Qin's cooperation was perfect. In the past, they had also used this method to kill many powerhouses. However, when they faced Xiaoyang, they felt a sense of helplessness. It was as if these methods were useless and could not hurt him at all. Xiaoyang turned around and looked at the blood-colored nail that was slowly disappearing. He only laughed disdainfully. Impossible! Impossible! Jiang Ning cried out in despair. He did not dare to believe that what he was seeing was real. Everything was too strange. So Jiang Ning could not do anything. He could not understand. Although there were all kinds of magical powers and magical powers existed in this world, it was really his first time seeing something like Xiaoyang. The impact on his senses almost made Jiang Ning fall into despair. Looking at Xiaoyang's smile, he felt that it was like the smile of a devil. It made people shudder. In the next moment, Xiaoyang soared into the sky and rushed towards Jiang Ning. Xiaoyang dared to say that he was invincible in the same realm. Their strength was indeed not bad. Compared to the Inflame realm, they were indeed much stronger. However, the gap between them and Xiaoyang still existed. Seeing Xiaoyang coming for him, Jiang Ning did not dare to let his guard down. He did not want to die here. In an instant, countless hand seals were formed continuously, and magical powers were displayed to their fullest. He had seen Han Qin's fate clearly. If he was not careful, he would face the same result. In the end, he could only die. How could Jiang Ning accept this? At this moment, Jiang Ning's body could only be described as surging waves. Countless powers and magical powers intertwined with each other to protect him. It was as if those magical powers were like countless guards, surrounding and protecting them. However, Xiaoyang only glanced at it. At the same time, he formed a sword technique, and the divine sword in his hand once again bloomed with countless sword lights. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Ning watched as the lightning around him turned into a prison and scattered all the power around him. Immediately, his heart became filled with despair. He did not know how these lightning appeared. However, Jiang Ning still did not give up. He continued to activate his magical powers, hoping that he could escape from this seemingly certain death battle. However, his speed was not as fast as the sword. A burning pain came first. When Jiang Ning lowered his head to look, the divine sword had already pierced his chest. Countless sword qi exploded in his body, and most of his life force was wiped out in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Ning's gaze became somewhat dull. He could not understand how his opponent could be so powerful. Xiaoyang killed Jiang Ning with a single sword strike. At the same time, he used the soul-searching technique to pull out his soul and swallowed it. While digesting the things in Jiang Ning's divine consciousness, Xiaoyang also looked at Xiaoman. Xiaoman was very valiant. It was as if the origin mysterious spear in her hand gave her endless confidence. Her attacks were even more bold, with a sense of heroism. Xiaoman had also stayed in the barbarian tribe for a long time and had also been infected with many habits. It was only because she served Xiaoyang that she restrained herself very well. Now that she was fighting, she was completely exposed. Her attacks were extremely ferocious and bold. Relying on the power of the supreme-grade spiritual weapon, she was faintly showing signs of suppressing the second young master. However, Xiaoman's battle now looked more or less like a reckless man's bravery. However, that was all she could do now. Xiaoman had overcome some of the obstacles in her heart with great difficulty. It was good enough that she could take the initiative to attack. Being able to fight to this extent was also beyond Xiaoyang's expectations. Although Xiaoman was bound to be defeated once the opponent caught a flaw, there was nothing that could be done. The current Xiao Man was also completely relying on her courage to suppress the opponent, but this was only temporary. The first spurt of energy, the second spurt of energy. When Zhang Xuanji saw that Han Qin and Jiang Ning were killed respectively, she was immediately furious. In this way, wouldn't the second young master be in danger? However, Zhang Xuanji could not free herself now. The only thing that was worth rejoicing was that the black-robed young man did not seem to have the intention to kill her. What a waste! 2 against 1 in the same realm, but they were slaughtered like chickens. Zhang Xuanji cursed in her heart, feeling very unlucky. These 2 guys were very powerful, but their strength was so weak that it made people feel very uncomfortable. Xiao Man attacked for more than 10 rounds in a row. Suddenly, she felt a murderous intent coming from behind. Chapter 2992. Feeling the killing intent, Xiao Man did not have any intention of defending herself. She still attacked with all her strength, as if she wanted to vent all her emotions on the opponent in front of her without mercy. In fact, Xiao Man also knew that the young master was watching her from behind. Even if there was an accident, he would block it for her. There was no need to worry about this at all. He only needed to concentrate on suppressing his opponent, or even defeating this second young master. That would be enough. Xiao Yang naturally felt the danger coming. In the blink of an eye, he appeared 10 feet behind Xiao Man and punched out. Boom! A powerful force came, and suddenly Xiao Yang was shaken back 3 feet, leaving a gully under his feet. Xiao Yang held the sword in one hand, but the other hand was trembling. He was a little out of control from the force. So strong! Xiao Yang could not help but gasp subconsciously. He did not expect that there would be a strong master at this time. In this daytime secret realm, there were strong masters everywhere. If there was a treasure in that place, it would attract the covetous eyes of the strong. It was not a strange thing. At the same time, Xiao Yang's eyes were also quickly searching the sky, trying to find the person who launched the sneak attack. Xiao Man was just a 3rd-level martial emperor. Once the opponent launched a sneak attack with such strength, she would die without a doubt. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yang saw a young man in a white robe rushing over with a smile. I didn't expect a 6th-level martial emperor to be able to block a blow from me. You're not bad. The white-robed man stood in the sky and sneered. The white-robed man's gaze towards Xiao Yang also became a bit more heated. Brother Lu, hurry up and kill them! The second young master roared hoarsely as he defended himself, being suppressed by a little girl whose cultivation level was lower than his. The second young master was indeed unhappy in his heart, although he also knew that as long as he held on for a while, once the girl's momentum weakened, it would be a good time to kill her. However, he couldn't take this insult. Moreover, Han Qin and Jiang Ning's death in battle had made him even more unhappy. Xiao Yang looked at the man, and at the same time searched for information about this person in Jiang Ning's spiritual consciousness. Lu Xinyu was a guest of West Wind City and had an extraordinary status. Jiang Ning knew very little about him because Lu Xinyu rarely appeared in the bright curse realm. Most of the time he cultivated in his own world. The city lord was also very respectful towards these people. Lu Xinyu was a genius. At the same time, he was also rather mysterious. Even the city lord's faction treated him with respect. From the fact that the second young master had to call him Brother Lu in his exasperation, it could be seen that this person's status was extremely high. However, one must know that even Jiang Ning was addressed by name. From this, it could be seen that although they were of the same cultivation level, the difference in the treatment they received was enormous. Of course, the difference in treatment still depended on their strength. Lu Xinyu had once made a move in West Wind City, severely injuring an expert of the same realm and almost losing his life. That was what Lu Xinyu had done when he first came to West Wind City. This Lu Xinyu, no matter how one looked at him, was not a character to be provoked. His strength was so strong that people had to be wary of him. According to the information that Jiang Ning knew, Lu Xinyu was a sixth-order expert and belonged to the top group of people. But in terms of his current, imposing manner, he was most likely no longer in the sixth-order ranks. Lu Xinyu's domineering aura was exposed, and his aura could not be restrained. It was obvious that he had just broken through. Unexpectedly, not long after Lu Xinyu entered the secret domain, he found his own opportunity and successfully broke through. This person's strength was not bad, and his luck was even more extraordinary. Such an opponent, no matter how one looked at it, was not easy to deal with. Second young master, that girl is unfamiliar with battle formations and is one realm lower than you. Why are you being suppressed? Lu Xinyu glanced at him with some disdain. When the second young master heard this, he was furious. Just as he was about to explode, he could only forcibly restrain himself. Lu Xinyu's identity was extraordinary, and he was a distinguished guest of West Wind City. Not to mention that they could not afford to provoke him. Once they shed all pretense of cordiality, the consequences would become very terrifying. Although the second young master was the most favored son of the city lord, his father would not offend Lu Xinyu for him. Regarding this, the second young master was still clear. He could only grit his teeth and did not dare to flare up. Lu Xinyu glanced at the infuriated second young master and sneered indifferently. Although Lu Xinyu had not stayed in the bright curse realm for long, he was still quite well informed. In his eyes, the second young master was just a piece of trash. If it were not for his father's favor and the many resources he obtained, he would not have reached the fourth-order martial emperor realm. A martial emperor who had eaten many resources to grow up was just like that. But the resources that the second young master had eaten were enough to create 10 martial emperor experts. This was also the reason why Lu Xinyu despised him. But sometimes a father doting on a son was something that could not be helped. No one could change it. Since he had encountered it today, and someone had invited him over to take charge, he naturally could not turn a blind eye. After all, they had benefited from West Wind City. They couldn't just do nothing. If they didn't help, it would be really unkind of them. Although Lu Xinyu did not claim to be virtuous, nor was he a kind person, he still had the most basic principles. Looking at the useless second young master, Lu Xinyu felt that it was a bit of an eyesore. At this moment, Zhang Xuanji secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Now that Lu Xinyu had arrived, the battle could be declared over. They would definitely win. As for Han Qin and Jiang Ning, those two pieces of trash, if they died, then so be it. It was fine as long as the second young master was unharmed. At the same time, Zhang Xuanji felt very helpless. She did not know why her opponent seemed to have endless strength. Up until now, his attacks had not weakened at all. In fact, he seemed to be getting stronger as the battle went on. Lu Xinyu yawned and looked at Xiaoyang lazily. The other party was able to block his attack. From this, it could be seen that he had some strength. It seemed that the other party was only pushed back and his hands were trembling. Other than that, he was unharmed. Lu Xinyu also felt that something was wrong. After taking a closer look, he realized that it was indeed so. Xiaoyang was also carefully sizing up Lu Xinyu. This person's temperament was extraordinary. In addition to the power that he had displayed in the previous attack, he could not be underestimated. Lu Xinyu was one of the best in the same realm. Now that he had broken through to the 7th rank, he could not be ignored. Chapter 2993. With the sudden appearance of such a powerful opponent, Xiaoyang did not dare to be careless. He looked at him meaningfully and began to plan again. Now, his first consideration was whether to put Xiao Man into the mountain river map. If Lu Xinyu attacked Xiao Man, he did not know how many times he could protect her. Therefore, if Xiaoyang wanted to make a move, he would be restrained. As a result, Xiaoyang seemed to only have one choice. It was too risky to bet on Lu Xinyu's character. After all, he had already made a move against Lil Man before. At that time, in order to win, he might do something out of line. "Xiao Man, come back!" Xiaoyang shouted. With such concerns, Xiao Yang felt that he could not take the risk. The risk was too great. If he gambled wrongly, he would have to pay a great price. Therefore, it was better to control everything in his own hands and reduce the threat. When Lil Man heard this, he didn't dare to hesitate at all. After a feint, he quickly retreated. After the second young master dodged the spear, he wanted to chase after her. However, he found that the girl was not far from the black-robed man and did not dare to rashly chase. The second young master knew Lu Xinyu. If he insisted on chasing, he would most likely be killed when the black-robed man attacked. At that time, everything would not be worth it. At that time, Lu Xinyu would naturally not let the black-robed man leave. However, he would only kill him to avenge him. Therefore, the second young master timidly took a few steps back and looked at the two of them with vigilance. Lu Xinyu had always been uncontrollable and had always looked down on the second young master. He was probably only going through the motions because of the Shimin family's kindness. Thinking of this, the second young master could not help but feel resentful. He was very unhappy. However, he still needed help, so the second young master could only endure and not speak. If he could not help but offend Lu Xinyu, he would be courting death. As for Zhang Xuanji, who was loyal to him, she was currently entangled and could not spare a hand to protect him. "Young master, what's wrong?" Xiao Man asked in confusion. Although Xiao Man wanted to continue fighting, she had to listen to her young master. "You did very well in this battle." Xiao Yang grinned. Hearing the young master's praise, Xiao Man immediately smiled and felt very comfortable. "But if this person attacks you, I can't guarantee that I can protect you every time." Xiao Yang frowned slightly and said in a deep voice. Lil Man nodded. She understood this principle as well. If the opponent was too strong, her young master wouldn't do this. From this, it could be seen that this opponent was very powerful and very difficult to deal with. It would not be easy to take care of him. Xiao Man understands. "Young master, you have to be careful too," Xiao Man said. Xiao Yang nodded and immediately opened the mountain river map. Xiao Man did not say much and directly walked in. When they went out, Xiao Yang made it clear to Xiao Man that once the situation was out of control, Xiao Man needed to directly enter the mountain river map to avoid being the weak point of being attacked by the opponent. When Lu Xinyu saw the girl walk into the map, his eyes almost popped out. That was a rare supreme-grade spiritual weapon. It might not be of much use in battle, but it was very useful in other aspects. In particular, it could be used to store living people. This was enough to make people envious. Good treasure. Lu Xinyu could not help but sigh. Xiao Yang put away the mountain river map, and a trace of battle intent flashed in his eyes. But next, this treasure will be mine, and that long spear will also be mine. Lu Xinyu sneered. When these words came out, the second young master's face turned cold, but he did not dare to act out. It was fine to be arrogant in front of Han Qin and Jiang Ning, but if he dared to put on airs in front of Lu Xinyu, it would more or less mean that he was courting death. No matter how angry the second young master was, he could only suppress his anger. Everything could only wait until he saw his father. Looks like there's no room for discussion. Are you ready to fight? Xiao Yang sneered. Although Xiao Yang had felt from the start that this matter would not end peacefully and that this battle was unavoidable, he did not expect this guy to be so straightforward. However, this was also good. There would be no psychological pressure between them. It was just a battle. So what if Lu Xinyu was a rank 7 powerhouse? When he was in the Yin Flame realm, he had already killed a rank 7 powerhouse with his own hands. At that time, he had the help of the Yin Flame spirit. It was as if he had the help of a god, so he could succeed. However, things were different now. It was not like Xiao Yang did not have a chance to kill him. Lu Xinyu looked at the man in the black robe with interest. The smile on his face was a little more disdainful and surprised. He was only a rank 6 martial king and he thought he could fight? However, after glancing at Han Qin and Jiang Ning's corpses, Lu Xinyu shook his head helplessly. It seemed that the other party did have such ability. If you are willing to take the initiative to hand over the treasure and then destroy your own cultivation, I can consider sparing your life. Lu Xinyu sneered. The white-robed man looked very arrogant. His words were more or less condescending. However, Lu Xinyu was not arrogant. He really had the strength and qualifications to say such words. Lu Xinyu still looked calm. At the same time, he glanced at the battle in the distance. Zhang Xuanji and Xing Tian had been in a stalemate for a long time. Until now, there was no possibility of victory or defeat. This was because Zhang Xuanji had been avoiding the battle. She tried her best not to fight head-on. She wanted to exhaust Xing Tian's power. However, Xing Tian's power seemed to be very rich. It was inexhaustible for a while. Lu Xinyu's gaze also fell on Xing Tian. He felt that his opponent would be that person. They were in the same realm, and the other party's strength did not seem to be weak. Only a battle between geniuses was a battle between the strong. Only an evenly matched battle would make him feel comfortable and gain something. If he crushed a cultivator of a lower realm, what was the point? Even if he won, it was just a matter of convenience. However, if he did not move this time, he would be able to obtain 2 superb spiritual weapons. Chapter 2994. Lu Xinyu observed the surroundings, as if to see if there were any dangers around. But now it seemed that everything was calm and there was no potential danger. And with his current ability, it was enough to suppress the area within a radius of 100 miles. As for the opponent he was about to face, Lu Xinyu was not in a hurry at all. Even if the battle had not started yet, he felt that he would undoubtedly win. Letting him live a little longer was a mercy. The second young master saw that Lu Xinyu still didn't seem to care and was even looking around. He frowned again and felt displeased. The second young master had always been pampered and had always been used to abusing others. Now that he was being treated like this, he naturally did not feel good about it. But fortunately, he was not too stupid. Therefore, he remembered these accounts in his heart. When the time was right, he must make Lu Xinyu pay the price for ignoring and even looking down on him. Lu Xinyu's ability to observe people's expressions was not bad. He naturally knew the thoughts of the trash second young master, but he did not care at all. No matter how much this trash thought, he would not be able to stir up any waves. Trash was trash after all. There were many things that could only be thought about in his heart and would not come true at all. Moreover, Lu Xinyu was indeed afraid of the city, Lord of West Wind City. Otherwise, he would have already killed this trash here. But he still had to give him some face. Now that he had brought this trash in front of the city lord, it would be a great merit. If you have anything else to say it as soon as possible. Don't die feeling aggrieved. Lu Xinyu glanced at him and sneered. Xiaoyang frowned slightly. He clenched the divine sword tightly, knowing that the next battle would be very dangerous and difficult. You don't think you can win, do you? No way, right? It can't be. Lu Xinyu pretended to be surprised and said. It had to be said that this guy's expression was very rich, as if he was serious. Xiaoyang also shook his head, helplessly. This guy had already begun to disturb his mind. It was indeed a good method. From this, it could be seen that Lu Xinyu's scheming was very deep and his combat experience was very rich. It would not be easy to take him down. What? Are you a mute? Can't you speak? Lu Xinyu seemed to be talking nonstop. He continued to ask with a shocked expression. Xiaoyang couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. This guy was really talkative. I want to see you die before I die. Can this wish be fulfilled? Xiaoyang sneered and asked. Hearing this, Lu Xinyu took a few steps back in shock. You really don't know what's good for you. I was kind enough to give you a chance to settle your affairs. Why do you still want me to die? I am so righteous and benevolent, yet you repay kindness with enmity. This makes me very sad. Lu Xinyu thumped his chest and stamped his feet. He had a pained expression on his face. It had to be said that this person's acting was quite convincing. What a drama queen! Xiao Yang thought to himself as he shook his head helplessly. There were indeed some problems with this person's mind, but it was just a small flaw in his character. As long as it was not infinitely exaggerated, it would not be a big deal. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang frowned. Suddenly his aura surged. Since there was no way to avoid this battle, he would just fight. What was there to be afraid of? Moreover, Xiao Yang also wanted to experience the strength of this genius. From this, he could also have some understanding of the bright curse realm. The human heart is not what it used to be. I am thinking of you, but you want to harm me. Lu Xinyu continued. Xiao Yang just sneered. This guy's thoughts were indeed unconstrained. At the same time, it could be seen that his character was just so. Just say so. Listening to your tone, you should use your fists to speak. Why do we need to be long-winded? Xiao Yang waved the divine sword in his hand and sneered. As soon as these words came out, Lu Xinyu's expression changed, and he smiled. He was very satisfied with such an opponent who was not long-winded and seemed to be somewhat strong-willed. I just hope that you won't be beaten to the point of kneeling and begging for mercy. Have some integrity. Otherwise, it won't be fun. Lu Xinyu's voice became much deeper as he spoke. In the next moment, Xiao Yang did not seem to want to listen to these fallacious arguments. He slashed out with his sword and took the initiative to start the battle. If he wanted to continue talking, Xiao Yang was naturally happy to accompany him. He did not believe that Xing Tian would lose. When the time came, it would be best for the two of them to join forces and take him down. However, when that time came, Xing Tian would probably take the initiative to fight. When that time came, the situation would change, and it would become Xing Tian's battle alone. Xing Tian was belligerent. It was not easy for him to show off in this secret realm. He naturally did not want to miss every opportunity. This was also very obvious. Xing Tian was that kind of person. Lu Xinyu stretched out his hand and gently squeezed, crushing the incoming sword qi. He shook his head in disappointment. Although this sword qi is barely considered dense, its meaning is still far from enough, Lu Xinyu said with a deep look. Xiao Yang frowned slightly when he heard this. When the second young master saw this, he was very unhappy. Why was there a need to be so long-winded? The second young master also hated Lu Xinyu. It was not only because Lu Xinyu looked down on him, but also because Lu Xinyu's teasing made him very unhappy. It was the same every time they fought. It was endless and disgusting. Let me teach you how to use sword qi. Lu Xinyu sneered. Immediately after, Lu Xinyu formed a sword finger and pointed it out. In the next moment, suddenly, a majestic sword qi flashed with a green light and directly slashed toward Xiao Yang. Wherever the sword qi passed, a whistling sound was heard. It was like a dragon's roar. This casual slash seemed to contain boundless power. Seeing the sword attack, Xiao Yang frowned slightly. He did not expect Lu Xinyu's attack to be so fierce. However, when he thought about it, a casual attack from a 7th-rank genius was naturally not simple. If he was not careful, it was normal for him to be severely injured. Therefore, Xiao Yang did not dare to be careless. In the blink of an eye, he furrowed his brows and also slashed out with his sword. The dark green sword aura and the lightning sword aura suddenly collided with each other. Immediately, sparks flew in all directions. The aftermath of the collision spread out and turned into countless sharp intents that pierced into the mountain wall. Countless fine holes appeared for no reason. At this moment, Lu Xinyu's expression suddenly became serious. Chapter 2995. Lu Xinyu knew that although it was just a casual attack, the power behind it was not inferior to a rank 6 powerhouse's attack. However, his opponent's seemingly casual attack was able to block it. It was clear that his opponent's cultivation was solid. Good sword. Lu Xinyu looked at the white and red, treasured sword and praised. For a sword to be able to have 2 completely different types of power, and it was even a middle-grade spiritual weapon, it was obviously not ordinary. In the next moment, the way Lu Xinyu looked at Xiaoyang also changed. It was as if he was looking at a fat sheep. The spiritual weapons that this person took out were of good quality. In that case, wouldn't all the treasures he had be of high quality? If he took all the treasures on him, wouldn't he be able to make a fortune? Suddenly, Lu Xinyu couldn't help but become excited. If that was the case, wouldn't he be able to make a fortune? Xiaoyang only sneered. At the same time, he quickly began to calculate in his heart. If he passively defended, it would be easy for him to be in a state of being beaten. Therefore, his choice was to take the initiative to attack. However, Lu Xinyu looked calm and composed. It was as if he was waiting for him to make a move. He wanted to counter every move he made. In the next moment, Xiaoyang held the treasured sword in his hand horizontally. Suddenly, countless flaming sword auras burst out. No matter what you say, let's see what kind of ability you have first. Plunder like fire! Xiaoyang shouted and no longer hesitated. Relying on the sharpness of the divine sword in his hand, he took the initiative to attack. Countless flaming sword auras acted as the vanguard and constantly rushed into the air. They were densely packed, as if they wanted to poke the arrogant, white-robed man into a hornet's nest. Looking at the powerful attack, Lu Xinyu only smiled disdainfully and said, "It looks very beautiful, but it's light. There's nothing powerful about it." After commenting, Lu Xinyu even felt that his evaluation was a little too high. Of course, Lu Xinyu would not be careless. He knew that since this person could kill Han Qin and Jiang Ning, who were at the same level, his strength was naturally not weak. Even if Han Qin and Jiang Ning were two pieces of trash, to be able to kill them, he had to be stronger than trash. Furthermore, the other party didn't seem to have lost much of his strength. Most likely, he was conserving his strength. In the next moment, Lu Xinyu flipped his palm and a drizzle fell. The drizzle looked light, but it contained an extremely strong spiritual energy. It could be said that it was filled with murderous intent. After the drizzle fell, sizzling sounds could be heard continuously. The flaming sword qi emitted wisps of green smoke and was extinguished at an extremely fast speed. The sword qi within was shattered into pieces. It was such a big move, but it looked as if it had been done casually. It didn't take much effort at all. The second young master was also dumbfounded. Although he was dissatisfied with Lu Xinyu, he had no choice but to accept this move. Just a casual technique was able to nullify the opponent's attack. How brilliant was such a technique! At the same time, the second young master's heart calmed down a lot. In this way, the black-robed young man and the others would not be able to escape death. This was the best outcome. Here, the second young master was in a very bad mood. He wanted nothing more than to skin them alive and tear their bones apart. Xiaoyang's heart couldn't help but tremble. Looking at the sword qi that was constantly being extinguished, he couldn't help but feel awestruck. This Lu Xinyu was really powerful. However, Xiaoyang had no intention of retreating. It was as if he wouldn't turn back until he hit a wall. Between the two of them, it was as if neither of them was willing to take a step back. They wanted to determine who was the better one. Seeing that the black-robed young man still dared to insist on charging forward, a disdainful smile appeared on Lu Xinyu's face. Even if you are indeed the best in the same realm and very strong, there is no way to make up for the gap between you and me. Lu Xinyu didn't stop. His hand seals were constantly changing. More drizzles continued to fall as if he wanted to extinguish a person's enthusiasm and battle intent. Every raindrop was filled with murderous intent. Xiaoyang furrowed his brows as he watched the flaming sword qi diminish. The gap between the realms was as if it couldn't be made up for. Even though Xiaoyang's cultivation was relatively deep, at this moment he seemed a little powerless. It was as if he couldn't match up to Lu Xinyu. Seeing this, the second young master sneered. He felt that the black-robed young man must have lost his mind. He was clearly being suppressed, but he still insisted on charging forward to fight. If that wasn't seeking his own death, then what was it? However, if he wanted to die, then so be it. Lu Xinyu glanced at him, but didn't care. How this guy wanted to die had nothing to do with him. It was fine as long as he could take his life. However, Lu Xinyu was looking forward to seeing how this stubborn guy would die miserably. Xiao Yang looked at Lu Xinyu, who seemed to be very confident, and his heart was filled with hatred. Since you are so confident, then I will make you pay the price. There were countless people who weren't weak, but they were defeated. The reason was very simple. It was because they were too conceited and completely ignored their opponents. Doing so was a great taboo, courting death. Looking at Xiao Yang, who was charging forward with all his might, Lu Xinyu suddenly felt that something was wrong. They weren't fools, but they were charging forward as if they were courting death. It was impossible for there to be no problem. In the blink of an eye, Lu Xinyu felt a sense of uneasiness in his heart. If this kid succeeded, he would probably be seriously injured. After thinking about this, Lu Xinyu's heart was a little frightened. Once these ruthless people started to fight with their lives on the line, they would stop at nothing and would even want to exchange their lives for theirs. If these ruthless people didn't have anything to rely on, they would definitely not be so impulsive. From this, it could be deduced that the other party must have a trump card. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to be so crazy. Lu Xinyu had encountered this once before. It was a pure wild cultivator. At the beginning, he was indeed weak, but that time, if it weren't for the elders of the sect secretly protecting him, he would have almost lost his life. Even though Lu Xinyu survived, he was seriously injured and had to lie in bed for half a year. How familiar was this scene? How similar was it to that time back then? Lu Xinyu snorted coldly because, in his opinion, this was different from the past. Back then, he and the wild cultivator were at the same level, but the person in front of him was one level lower. The current Lu Xinyu was no longer the Lu Xinyu of the past. In the next moment, the corners of Lu Xinyu's mouth curled up slightly. Sure enough, it was similar to what he thought. However, if the opponent wanted to touch him, they would have to pay a painful price. Chapter 2996. Xiao Yang only had Lu Xinyu in his eyes. His current goal was very clear, and that was to defeat him. In the next moment, the divine sword left his hand, and the remaining flaming sword chi erupted from the divine sword. The sound of explosions rose one after another. The pure collision of power shook the space as if it could collapse at any time. It was very impressive. The drizzle and the explosion of flames looked very gorgeous. Countless shockwaves came down and hit Xiao Yang's body. However, he didn't seem to feel it at all and continued to charge forward. Lu Xinyu saw Xiao Yang launch his final charge, and the corner of his mouth revealed a disdainful smile. Now, the fox's tail was finally revealed. No matter how powerful your trump card is, it is only at the 6th level martial emperor realm. It is not enough to reach the apex. What's more, now that he was on guard, it would not be so easy to succeed. Mixed space-breaking strike. Xiao Yang roared angrily. Suddenly, the fist intent that he had suppressed for a long time completely erupted at this moment. Since he had endured for so long, Xiao Yang would not be polite. In fact, he knew very well that if he could not kill Lu Xinyu in one blow or directly beat him until he lost the ability to fight, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Therefore, it would be best if he could decide the outcome now. Lu Xinyu pressed down with a handprint and suppressed the divine sword, preventing it from advancing any further. However, in the next moment, he felt an incomparably tyrannical aura and his face changed drastically. The fist intent was so strong that even Lu Xinyu was shocked and frightened. Lu Xinyu did not expect that at this moment Xiao Yang's power would be so terrifying. It was unstoppable. Under the tyrannical fist intent, the drizzle evaporated in an instant, leaving no trace. When the second young master saw this, he was even more frightened and terrified. Even though the fist intent wasn't aimed at him, this force still caused him to be extremely afraid. If it were to land on his body, then the final result would naturally be death without a doubt, and his body would be smashed into pieces. Mystic water seal. Lu Xinyu shouted and pressed down with one hand. Suddenly, a layer of barrier appeared under his feet. At the same time, countless amounts of mysterious water appeared and wrapped around him. Now Lu Xinyu was panicking. He knew that it was impossible for him to dodge. Once he moved, he would become a live target. Therefore, he only had one choice now, and that was to block his opponent's attack with all his strength. The surging power rushed out crazily at this moment. Lu Xinyu was like a madman, desperately drawing out the power in his body. He didn't know if his defense would succeed, but all he could do was try his best to block it. He couldn't slack off at all. If he were to slack off in the slightest, the final outcome would be him enduring the ferocious fist intent until he was beaten to death. The barrier was as brittle as a piece of paper, collapsing with a single touch. Endless fist intent erupted at this moment and rushed towards Lu Xinyu. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were galloping, unstoppable. The fists continued to fall, and the mysterious water around Lu Xinyu's body splashed in all directions. Layer after layer of black water appeared continuously, blocking the ferocious fist will. Lu Xinyu maintained his hand gesture and used all his strength to block the fist intent. However, his face twisted very quickly. Although the profound water had helped him block most of the fist intent, he was unable to avoid the impact. As a result, his entire body trembled, and his soul was on the verge of collapsing. Lu Xinyu had tried his best to accomplish many things, and his will was relatively firm. Otherwise, he would not have been able to maintain his current state under such a shock. The black water would have broken long ago, and his soul would have been completely destroyed. Although Lu Xinyu was unwilling to admit it, the current situation was so bad. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't completely block the incoming fists. In the blink of an eye, the mysterious water began to collapse. It seemed that it would shatter in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the pressure on Lu Xinyu was increasing. He felt an endless crisis rapidly approaching. He had never thought that he would fail miserably at such an easy task. He had been prepared for the same lesson, but he still had to suffer it a second time. Lu Xinyu's heart was in even more pain. He lamented and blamed himself. Now that things had developed to this extent, he was helpless and didn't know what to do. However, Xiaoyang seemed to have made up his mind. His power continued to explode. It was as if he would not stop until Lu Xinyu was killed. Boom! The mysterious water shield couldn't block the fierce fist intent in the end and exploded in an instant. Immediately, the remaining fist intent poured into Lu Xinyu's body and blasted him away. Xiaoyang was also shaken by the mysterious water and fell down, unable to control himself. The eruption of these two forces caused the mountains within a 5-kilometer radius to be shaken until they were full of potholes. It was as if they could collapse at any time. Xiaoyang fell to the ground. At the same time, he felt as if his bones were about to break. At the same time, the wounds left by the mysterious water on his body made him feel even colder. Fortunately, he had a breath of will to protect his body. Otherwise, the mysterious water would have penetrated his body, and his injuries would have become even more serious. The second young master, who was watching from afar, was so scared that his teeth were chattering. No matter what, he would never have thought that he would kick an iron plate this time. Perhaps he might even lose his life as well. The black-robed young man looked ordinary, but he was a truly ruthless person. He fought with all his might and still had the confidence to do so. That was the most terrifying thing. Such a person was indeed not to be trifled with. Making an enemy out of him was like making a fool of oneself. Thinking of this, the second young master's heart became even more uncomfortable. If this continued, wouldn't he lose his life? However, the second young master quickly changed his mind and his gaze fell on Xiaoyang. At this time, if he was seriously injured and his life was hanging by a thread, wouldn't it be a great opportunity to kill him? With this thought, the second young master's mind became much more resolute. This was the time to decide his life and death. If he could kill the black-robed young man, then he would be the fisherman. Chapter 2997. The second young master walked over timidly. At the same time, he kept convincing himself that as long as the other party's situation was bad enough, it would be a good chance for him to survive and even make a fortune. If he gambled correctly, then glory and wealth would be waiting for him. No matter how he looked at it, the black-robed young man's things were not ordinary. If he could turn them into his own wealth, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Moreover, if he missed such an opportunity, he would probably never have such an opportunity again. However, in the next moment, the second young master stood there dumbfounded. He no longer dared to move, and his eyes became a little hollow. That was because he saw the black-robed young man stand up like a carp. Although he looked a little disheveled, the aura he exuded was extremely powerful. With his strength, there was no way he could compete with him. In an instant, the second young master's heart was filled with despair. He thought that he would have a great opportunity to pick up the treasures. However, who would have thought that it was just his wishful thinking? After Xiaoyang stood up, he only glanced at the second young master indifferently. That trash did not dare to move again. After suppressing that trash, Xiaoyang's gaze fell on Lu Xinyu. After all, that was his real opponent. Lu Xinyu had already stood up shakily. His nose was bruised, and his whole body was twitching due to the pain. Blood was flowing out. Lu Xinyu also looked at Xiaoyang with resentment. He did not expect that this guy would have such a big trump card. What was even more ridiculous was that he was still hit even though he was on guard. That was ridiculous. Now, Lu Xinyu even seemed to struggle to stand. He did not know how many of his teeth were broken. He looked extremely miserable. His previous carefree aura had disappeared without a trace at this moment, and he looked even more powerless. At this moment, Lu Xinyu's heart was filled with hatred. There was actually a second time that he had failed miserably. However, this time he did not have the protection of his elders behind him. Xiaoyang shook his head helplessly. He had prepared such a big killing move, but it was not enough to kill Lu Xinyu or make him unable to stand up again. He had miscalculated. However, one had to admit that Lu Xinyu's strength was indeed unfathomable. Lu Xinyu's hasty response was able to block his hidden killing move. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would have lost their life under Xiaoyang's all-out attack. Therefore, Xiaoyang had no choice but to be more careful and cautious. Lu Xinyu was indeed a difficult character to deal with. He might still have some trump cards, so he could not attack. Once he made a move, he had to kill him. Kill him. Otherwise, if such a person was given the opportunity, the other party might be able to turn the situation around. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang did not act rashly. At this moment, Lu Xinyu's psychological pressure. The robe he was wearing was a middle-tier spiritual weapon, but after being hit by Xiaoyang's fist, it was now useless and useless. It could be said that if it weren't for the robe, Lu Xinyu would not be able to stand up. He would have fallen to the ground, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. At the same time, he was constantly thinking about how to deal with this situation in order to turn the tables. However, looking at Lu Xinyu's condition, he did not seem to be in a bad state. If Lu Xinyu's brain wasn't muddled, he wouldn't be able to turn the tables. If Lu Xinyu borrowed external forces, Zhang Xuanji would be suppressed and would not be able to help. As for the second young master, he would have wet his pants from fear. It would be impossible to get him to help. Trash like him would not even be enough to fill the gaps between other people's teeth. Could it be that Lu Xinyu had fallen into a desperate situation and was about to die? Lu Xinyu had obtained a strand of fortune in the hidden territory and finally broke through to the 7th level. How could he be willing to lose his life here? Therefore, Lu Xinyu was not willing to lose his life here, so he could only be more cautious. I've underestimated you. You must have used all your strength in that punch just now. Now, you're just strong on the outside. Lu Xinyu suddenly laughed and said, When Xiaoyang heard this, he frowned slightly. Soon after, he smiled. If Lu Xinyu really dared to think so, then now would be the death of Lu Xinyu. If you really have the ability, then come over and see if you can kill me. After Lu Xinyu finished speaking, he coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of blood. Now Lu Xinyu was also bold. He didn't know how much strength this rank 6 martial emperor still had. He didn't dare to rashly attack, so he wanted to use words to test how much strength Lu Xinyu had left and whether he could make a comeback. If Lu Xinyu didn't lose a lot of strength, then Lu Xinyu wouldn't dare to act rashly. If he had poured all his strength into that punch, Lu Xinyu would have killed him even if it meant risking a drop in cultivation level. Such a person was too terrifying. Since he had become an enemy, he naturally had to kill him as soon as possible. Of course, all of this had to be based on feasibility. Xiaoyang snorted disdainfully and said, "If you were really sure, you wouldn't have said another word." It could be said that neither of them could figure out the other's state. Both of them were in seclusion and acted rashly. When Lu Xinyu heard this, his face turned ugly. Such a wild cultivator had always understood people's hearts. It was almost impossible to fool him with words. Thinking of this, Lu Xinyu couldn't help but feel a little desperate and helpless. It seemed that it wouldn't be easy to get rid of this guy. Xiaoyang waved his hand, and the Thunder Fire Divine sword returned to his hand. Although Xiaoyang couldn't figure out the other party's state, he understood another thing. If this stalemate continued, it wouldn't be a good thing. They were alone in the secret realm, but Lu Xinyu was different. They had Westgate City behind them. Once they started to call for their friends, it would be very difficult to escape when the time came. He would know how much strength Lu Xinyu still had. When Lu Xinyu saw that Xiaoyang was ready to continue attacking, he was shocked. He knew that Xiaoyang still had strength left. As such, it was almost impossible for him to compete with him in his current state. Lu Xinyu was seriously injured and his situation was very bad. However, his hand moved and formed a seal. Chapter 2998. Although Lu Xinyu had been schemed against by Xiaoyang and was now injured, he was not a person who would resign himself to death. He would not collapse because of this. It was also because Lu Xinyu was highly valued that he had a spiritual robe to protect his body. That was why he was not beaten to death. Although the robe was completely shattered, he seemed to want to continue fighting. Xiaoyang frowned and looked at Lu Xinyu, who was accumulating power. At the same time, he held the Thunderfire Divine sword. No matter how he looked at it, this opponent was not to be trifled with. However, Xiaoyang would not be afraid because of this. If they continued fighting, he was also very confident that he could kill Lu Xinyu. It was naturally best if he could cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Once he left alive, there would be endless trouble in the future. This time, Lu Xinyu suffered a loss because of his carelessness. If they were to fight next time, it might not be the same. Moreover, the feud between them had been established today. It was naturally impossible for them to get along peacefully in the future. Strands of sword intent were constantly shooting out, forming a sword barrier around Xiaoyang's body. No matter what kind of magical means Lu Xinyu had, it would only be a bitter battle. At that time, they would see who had better means and who was more powerful. Lu Xinyu glanced at Xiaoyang, and his face suddenly sank. Lu Xinyu had to admit that he was indeed careless when dealing with this kid who was one realm lower than him. Moreover, he had let the other party seize the opportunity to beat him to such a state. No matter what, he could not take this loss for nothing. At this moment, the one with the most complicated feelings was the second young master. In this short period of time, his state of mind had undergone many changes. He had not expected it to become like this. Fortunately, Lu Xinyu had stood up again. As long as he did not fall, the second young master felt that he was safe and would not be killed here. Looking at Zhang Xuanji again, he had been showing weakness and being suppressed, but now he seemed to be really weak. Under Xing Tian's fierce attacks, he also began to feel a little powerless. Even Zhang Xuanji, could not understand why this young man's aura was so strong. It could even be said that he was an unparalleled existence. Seeing that both sides were at a disadvantage, the second young master's brows were almost twisted into a fried dough twist. He really couldn't understand why things had turned out this way. He could have run amok in this secret realm, but why had he kicked an iron plate today? For a time, the second young master became angrier the more he thought about it. He wished for nothing more than to eat the flesh of these outsiders who didn't know what was good for them. But that was only what he thought. He was only the second generation of a rich family and did not have much strength. If it were not for the protection of his family, he would have been a corpse on the streets. What he relied on was only the power and influence of West Wind City. Suddenly, Lu Xinyu let out a shout and slapped down with his palm. As the palm slammed down, the spiritual power in the world twisted and formed a vortex in the blink of an eye. Under the white light, the huge palm print appeared even more crystal clear. But the murderous intent contained in it was very terrifying. For a time, it seemed that the world had changed color, and the original day had become a little more blue. Xiaoyang raised his head to look at the gigantic palm that was pressing down, and his expression became even more solemn. Lu Xinyu was indeed a person who was popular in the Bright Curse realm. Even the second young master had to respectfully address him as Brother Lu. Even though he was severely injured, he could still display the great power of a 7th-level martial emperor. If this palm fell, an ordinary city, if no expert blocked it, would be crushed into powder and the city would turn into a lake. Wrath of the mysterious water. When the palm print fell, Xiaoyang swung the divine sword in his hand. Suddenly, flames rose up, and in the blink of an eye, it looked like a fire dragon. Water and fire were incompatible, and they were tit for tat. True fire. Xiaoyang shouted in a low voice, and there was no fear. Around him, at a glance, it was like a sea of fire. When fighting, it could be said that one couldn't show the slightest bit of cowardice. If one showed any cowardice, the consequence would be death. Xiaoyang was also a ruthless person. At the same time, he was very confident. He did not think that he was weaker than a 7th-level martial emperor. Therefore, he wanted to try his luck as well. Seeing Xiaoyang's bravery, Lu Xinyu could not help but frown. This guy was really putting his life on the line. One had to admit that if his opponent was hesitant and calculated everything clearly, he would not be able to hurt Lu Xinyu. This person was bold and careful. As long as there was an opportunity, he would not miss it. He would firmly grasp it in his hands. Thinking about this, Lu Xinyu could not help but be moved. Fighting with such a person and putting his life on the line was very unwise. However, at this point, did he have a way out? Lu Xinyu was not sure of his opponent's condition. If he continued to fight, it was hard to say what the result would be. Right now, he did not have much choice. Even if he had to bite the bullet, he had to fight. If he ran away now, once his opponent started to chase him, it would be difficult to escape. Water and fire collided. The two forces began to collide. Immediately, thick smoke began to rise. The area was shrouded in thick smoke. It looked like a fairyland. However, what was happening was an extremely dangerous battle. The slightest mistake could cost one's life. "Old man, you dare to be distracted while fighting me?" A shout rang out, followed by a miserable shriek. Standing in the mist, the second young master, who could still feel the heat, was even more frightened. He clearly heard that the scream was Zhang Xuanji's. Could it be that they were in an absolute disadvantage? If that was the case, what should they do? The second young master's heart was close to despair. Although he could not see the specific situation of the battle due to the thick mist, he could feel that the aura of the two sides were different. Xiaoyang did not stop waving the sword in his hand. Countless flaming sword, qi, continued to surge out. Like peeling silk from a cocoon, it was constantly breaking down his opponent's strength. However, Lu Xinyu did not seem to want to give up. Therefore, he continued to increase his strength, hoping that with this move, he would be able to defeat this aggressive person. Today he had even brought out his best skill, the so-called victory and defeat. However, because of his carelessness before, he paid a corresponding price. Even though he clenched his teeth and held on, it was difficult for him to continue. Chapter 2999. At this moment, the one who felt the most unbearable was the second young master. He was on the verge of despair. Things were developing too quickly, and he felt very uncomfortable. Although the second young master was arrogant, he was not stupid. His arrogance was built on his claws and teeth. But now his claws and teeth were about to be broken. If he continued to pretend, it would more or less make him look stupid. The second young master was also thinking, based on the current situation, it was the best time to escape. However, he was not sure if Lu Xinyu could kill the two of them. Lu Xinyu's talent was trustworthy. His strength wasn't weak either. Even his father had praised him. Therefore, Lu Xinyu was the reason why the second young master was hesitant about whether or not he should leave. Although the situation was not optimistic, these geniuses had their own thoughts. Sometimes it was just a small mistake. As long as it didn't hurt the foundation, it was fine. Thinking about this, the second young master found it hard to calm down. He felt like there was still a chance to turn this around. However, he was still worried because he couldn't see absolute suppression. As for the three outsiders, the second young master knew nothing. It was as if they suddenly appeared. The opening of the mystery realm of daylight would attract many powerful cultivators from the surrounding worlds to come and search for fortune. This place could be described as a place where the good and the bad were mixed together. Because of this, his father sent Zhang Xuanji, an experienced 7th-level powerhouse, to protect him. Such a team was not weak, but this time they kicked an iron plate. Perhaps their legs would be broken. Suddenly there was a grunt. The second young master was overjoyed. He could tell that the grunt was made by the opponent. Xiao Yang's current situation was indeed not good. Although he had used many techniques, in the end, he could only block most of the attacks. In the end, he was still hit by one of the attacks and fell to the ground. However, the divine sword was still standing in front of him, constantly releasing its power. That was why it was not crushed by Mount Tai. Otherwise, if all the power poured down, the final outcome would be unpredictable. After a while, the godly sword fell to the ground. Xiao Yang immediately used his movement technique and quickly dodged. With a loud thud, the place where Xiao Yang was standing just now was directly bombarded into a deep pit. Xiao Yang glanced sideways and frowned slightly. This Lu Xinyu was indeed powerful. Lu Xinyu looked at the endless white fog and frowned. He stared at Xiao Yang with astonishment in his eyes. This young man's reaction speed was too fast. To be able to dodge this, he was indeed powerful. No wonder he did not avoid Shimincheng even after hearing the name of Shimincheng in this secret realm. It turned out that he was truly capable. In the next moment, Lu Xinyu frowned even more because he saw that Zhang Xuanji had been defeated. She was lying on the ground on the verge of death. Xing Tian stepped on Zhang Xuanji's chest, and his gaze was already fixed on him. The other party was also a 7th Order Martial Emperor, and he was able to defeat Zhang Xuanji. It was obvious that his strength was not weak. At this moment, Lu Xinyu also realized that the current situation was very unfavorable to him. If they continued to fight, who knew what kind of unforeseen events would occur? Although the fog was thick and the second young master could not see clearly with his cultivation, they were different. They could still see each other. The fog was just a way to cover their eyes. They were able to lock onto each other, mostly relying on their divine senses. Powerful indeed. Lu Xinyu sighed sincerely. Previously, he had used all his strength to defeat Xiao Yang. If it did not work, he could also test out the other party's strength. Now, although he already had an idea, the situation had changed again. This made Lu Xinyu feel more and more helpless. He was indeed tyrannical and was one of the best in the same realm. But who among the people standing here wasn't? Lu Xinyu shook his head helplessly and sighed. What else could he do? Xiao Yang held the Thunder Fire Divine Sword, but he was also ready to attack at any time. Although the previous loss was great, Xiao Yang could still hold on. He even had most of his strength left. This was the advantage of entering the martial emperor realm with 9 small spiritual veins. The spiritual power he possessed was much thicker than that of an ordinary martial emperor. However, how to kill Lu Xinyu was a problem that Xiao Yang had to face. This person had now become extremely cautious, and his attacks were even more merciless. He did not make any careless moves. If one wanted to kill him like this, it would not be an easy task. Therefore, Xiao Yang was also a little worried. However, fortunately, the battle on Xing Tian's side could be considered to be over. If he had his help, Lu Xinyu would definitely not be able to leave alive if the two of them worked together. It was difficult to kill him alone, but it was different if the two of them worked together. Suddenly, Lu Xinyu's hand moved again, as if he was forming a seal. It was not Lu Xinyu's style to sit and wait for death. Moreover, Lu Xinyu had a good grasp of the situation and had a good view of it. It could be said that the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. Only by killing one of them could he see a glimmer of hope. Xiao Yang saw that Lu Xinyu was not afraid at all and even wanted to continue the battle. He did not dare to be careless. When facing an opponent of this level, sometimes even a small mistake could bring a disaster to oneself. In an instant, the thunder fire gathered again, and countless powers merged at an extremely fast speed. Xing Tian also glanced over curiously, then stared at Zhang Xuanji at his feet. This old man had lived for a long time and had used the right strategy. However, he had met Xing Tian, which was why he had ended up like this. If you lose, you have to admit it. After all, no one wants to leave behind any future troubles. Don't you think so? Xing Tian said casually, and at the same time a power exploded under his feet. In an instant, Zhang Xuanji's body was torn apart by the heavy blow. Xing Tian looked at her with disdain and then looked at Lu Xinyu. As long as he killed this person, it would be as if nothing had happened. At that time, Westgate City would naturally not know that it was them who did it. All of a sudden, Lu Xinyu let out a low roar and opened his hands. Suddenly, 2 powerful forces shot toward Xiao Yang and Xing Tian like flying dragons. The flying dragons soared with boundless momentum, as if it was unstoppable. Chapter 3000. Xiao Yang's expression did not change as he watched the flying dragon coming at him. He swung his sword down with all his strength. There was not much difference in their strength. The only difference was their cultivation realm. Although he was somewhat suppressed in this aspect, Xiao Yang understood the principle of playing to his strengths and avoiding his weaknesses, which was why he could challenge these powerful experts. However, after the sword light flashed, the flying dragon fell to the ground like a puddle of water, like a drizzle of rain. Suddenly, Xiao Yang's heart trembled. What was Lu Xinyu's motive for launching such an attack? Or could it be that he still had other plans? For a moment, Xiao Yang could not figure it out, but when he saw Lu Xinyu's body turning into water droplets, he could not help but frown. Xing Tian also shook his head with a helpless smile. He had not been able to experience the ability of this master, but he did not expect the outcome to be like this. It was more or less disappointing, and even a fly in the ointment. But there was nothing he could do about it. Since the other party had admitted defeat, it was impossible for him to pursue and attack. Xiao Yang stood where he was, looking at the drizzle that continued to fall, a bitter smile on his face. Just now, Lu Xinyu's imposing manner of wanting to fight to the death was fake. It could be said that it was just a bluff to give him a way to escape. What was even more ridiculous was that he had really escaped. Lu Xinyu was already dozens of miles away. If he were to chase after him now, it would most likely be difficult to catch up to him in a short period of time. Perhaps they would encounter people from West Wind City in the pursuit. If that was the case, the situation they were facing would immediately change. At that time, it would be hard to say who would kill who. In a short while, all the water droplets had fallen to the ground, and the large pits that had appeared because of the battle had turned into lakes. As the mist became thinner, the second young master stood where he was, dumbstruck like a wooden chicken, not daring to move at all. At the same time, the second young master could not believe that he had been betrayed. He had never thought that Lu Xinyu would escape alone, and even he did not see any clues. Zhang Xuanji was also dead, and now he was the only one left standing. Xiao Yang glanced at the trash and immediately began to move towards him. Seeing the other party walking towards him, the second young master was so frightened that his legs were trembling. He even fell to the ground. The second young master of West Wind City, who was used to tyrannical abuse, was now really scared. Anything could happen in the secret territory, and his identity had become a useless topic of conversation. Moreover, if the other side was really afraid of West Wind City, they would not have fought with them from the beginning. They would have obediently handed over the spear and then fled with their tails between their legs. Fellow Taoists, this lowly one had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me for my previous offense. The second young master stammered. The fear of death made the second young master even more terrified. He knew that if he did not beg for mercy now, only death would await him. No matter how big the humiliation this time was, as long as he could endure it and return to the Shimin clan alive, it wouldn't be too late to make further plans. If he were to confess here, then everything would be over. There was no need to think about anything else. Xing Tian glanced at him, his eyes full of disgust. The second young master was as arrogant as he was before, but now he was as humble as he was. Seeing that Xiaoyang was still approaching, the second young master was even more agitated. He directly knelt down and kowtowed. I really didn't mean to offend you. Please don't take offense. If you're willing to let me go, as long as you ask, my father will definitely thank you. The second young master constantly begged for mercy. A wise man submits to circumstances. The second young master was not stupid. In order to survive, he would do anything. Xiaoyang sneered. After you return, your reward will most likely be the endless pursuit of West Wind City. As soon as these words came out, the second young master's eyes almost froze. What Xiaoyang said was indeed the truth. Based on the style of West Wind City, it was naturally impossible for them to let the matter go. This grudge would most likely not end until one of them was dead. If these three outsiders did not die, how could West Wind City keep its face? In any case, West Wind City was one of the 4 cities. How could they swallow such humiliation? I won't. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I'm willing to use my spirit to gain power and even sign a contract. If West Wind City dares to do anything unfavorable to the 3 of you, I will die a horrible death. My spirit will shatter. As long as he could survive, it did not matter what method he used. Xiaoyang glanced at the person who was begging for mercy and also shook his head with a smile. These children of rich families, relying on their family's influence, acted tyrannically everywhere. When a great disaster was about to befall them, they would kneel down and beg for mercy. They really knew when to yield and when not to yield. Xing Tian did not care. He felt that the strength of West Wind City was just that. Moreover, if the situation was not right, they could just leave. What harm was there? I won't kill you, Xiaoyang said indifferently. Lu Xinyu had escaped using the method of a cicada shedding its carapace. This news would inevitably spread to West Wind City, so it was impossible to bury this matter in the ground. Therefore, it didn't matter whether this piece of trash was killed or not. He was just a trash. If he lived, he would only bring disaster to West Wind City. It did not matter. The second young master looked at Xiaoyang in disbelief, his heart trembling. This way of survival came too suddenly, making him feel a little unreal. Killing you will only dirty my hands. If you want to live, it's simple. Hand over all your belongings. After all, if you do something wrong, you have to pay a price. If you dare to hold back, you can naturally walk back alive, but missing an arm or a leg is unavoidable, Xiaoyang said casually. The second young master dared not hesitate, immediately took out all the storage rings on his body, and even the robe on his body. He directly took it off and offered it with both hands. "Benefactor, I will never forget your kindness. I will not offend you in the slightest again," the second young master said with a grateful expression. Xiaoyang received the treasures with disdain. Scram. When the second young master heard this, it was as if he had been pardoned. After thanking him, he left without stopping. At this moment, the other party had not changed his mind, so he still had a chance to live. If he stayed for too long, it would be hard to say. Xing Tian did not have any opinion on Xiaoyang's way of handling things. After all, trash is still trash after escaping. This was something that could not be changed. The second young master's survival would not affect the overall situation. Immediately, Xiaoyang did not care about the second young master and quickly walked over to Zhang Xuanji's body. The knowledge of this 7th level master, compared to Han Qin, was much more. Chapter 3001. After taking Zhang Xuanji's consciousness, Xiaoyang and Xing Tian quickly left. The place where the battle took place had now become a place of trouble. If Lu Xinyu brought the people of West Wind City back, then their situation would become very dangerous. As for whether or not to kill the second young master of West Wind City, Xing Tian did not have any objections. After Lu Xinyu left, the life and death of a trash did not seem so important anymore. It could even be said that they did not put that trash in their eyes at all. It could be said that the second young master's life and death could be killed or not. Xiaoyang was not fond of killing, so there was nothing wrong with letting him live. After walking for about 100 miles, Xiaoyang released Little Man from the mountain river map. Little Man's expression was, as usual after coming out, and she did not ask about the final result, but she was really happy right now. She did not expect that in this secret domain, she would be the first one of the 3 to obtain an opportunity, and it was a top-grade spiritual weapon. In the future, if she nurtured it well, it would naturally be easy to upgrade its grade. Little Man was also carefully observing the treasure in her hand. In the mountain river map, it had already resonated with the weapon spirit, but her current cultivation was still shallow and she could not exert its power. Moreover, the chaotic Yuan mysterious spear technique also had its own set of techniques. It was impossible to master it without talent and time, or it could be said that both were indispensable. Little Man loved it so much that sometimes she would even dance around, appearing very excited. This was also the first time that Little Man had left the land of the flowing cloud domain. It was inevitable that she would be excited to suddenly obtain such a great fortune. Xiaoyang did not care about her. It was understandable that this little girl was happy. Then he sat down cross-legged, and while nourishing his injuries, he began to search for information from Zhang Xuanji's consciousness. Xing Tian, on the other hand, sat to the side. He felt indescribably comfortable. Although Zhang Xuanji's strength was a little lacking due to her old age, Xing Tian didn't care. That old tortoise was still able to withstand the pressure. The resentment that he had accumulated over the past few days had been completely vented at this moment. His gloominess was swept away, and he even felt a little proud. As for Lu Xinyu, who had escaped, there was no harm in that. After all, the other party did not even know his background. When this matter was over, and he left the bright, cursed domain, the 3,000 middle worlds were so big that it was almost impossible to meet him. Or perhaps it would be very difficult for them to meet again in the daytime secret realm. Seeing that Xiao Man was also quite happy, Xing Tian's mood also became very good. It seemed that this feeling was quite good, although they did not obtain any substantial benefits along the way. Xing Tian still felt that he had benefited a lot from this trip. In particular, the relationship between this pair of master and servant, brother and sister, was even more enviable. Xiao Man, what you have in your hand is a supreme grade spirit weapon. In this bright curse realm, I'm afraid everyone will fight for it. You should understand the principle of not showing off one's wealth, right? Xing Tian joked. When Xiao Man heard this, she was stunned for a moment, and then she didn't seem as excited as before. There was even some self-blame in her eyes, and she looked like she was about to cry. Seeing this, Xing Tian's heart skipped a beat. He felt that the situation was a little bad. Although this girl had regained a little confidence in the previous attack, the concept of inferiority had not been completely dispelled. This problem was probably going to start again. You can do whatever you want now. With me and your young master here, no one can do this to you. I mean, when you go out alone in the future, you have to be careful. Xing Tian explained in a panic. Xiao Man frowned, pondered for a while, and said, "But why do I have to be alone?" Xing Tian was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and didn't say anything more. This girl obviously had a lot of things that she didn't know. Of course, there were some things that didn't need to be told to her too early. If some things were revealed, it would only add some unnecessary emotions in advance. It seemed to be quite good now. As for what would happen in the future, he would talk about it in the future. At least the current atmosphere was very good. Moreover, it was easier said than done to go to a higher world after attaining the Great Tao. Xiao Man, on the other hand, looked like she didn't fully understand. Then, she began to study the long spear in her hand again. Although she wasn't as tall as the mixed yuan mysterious heart spear, she didn't look uncoordinated when she waved it. Xing Tian lay on the ground and felt that the clouds in the sky were a little dazzling, so he covered them with his hand. What a daytime secret realm! There is never night or darkness. Xing Tian muttered in a self-deprecating manner. It wasn't unreasonable that there were no living creatures in the daytime secret realm. There was only light here. Although it wasn't considered a hot summer, everything was about yin and yang. The daytime secret realm was like a lonely sun. Naturally, nothing was born. The flowers, plants, and trees that they saw were all transformed by spiritual power. These were all the handiwork of the daytime secret realm. It was originally a place without life, but it still had to display a lively appearance. This was a little strange. However, there were all kinds of strange things in the boundless universe. There were still some benefits to the daytime secret realm. Because of the special factors here, the things that were created would also be different. Moreover, the daytime secret realm couldn't be said to be a lonely sun because the light here wasn't considered to be a sun. It was just a metaphor. After a few hours, Xiaoyang finally recovered from his injuries. At the same time, he also sorted out most of the things in Zhang Xuanji's divine sense. When Xing Tian saw that Xiaoyang had recovered, he was a little worried. He couldn't help but frown and ask, "What happened?" Xiaoyang's face was a little ugly. Obviously, he had heard some unfavorable news from the other party's divine sense, which was why he was like this. It seemed that it wasn't a small matter if it was something that could make him worried. Lil Man also walked over, and his expression became a little curious. Something might be happening to the Nangong family. Xiaoyang smiled bitterly and said helplessly. When Xing Tian heard this, he immediately waved his hand indifferently. Although they had stayed in the Nangong family for a period of time, they weren't close. Furthermore, when they were leaving, they ended up in such an unpleasant situation. If it wasn't for the fact that City Lord Nangong knew how to conduct himself, it was likely that they would have ended up parting on bad terms. Perhaps they might even have ended up fighting. As for what would happen to Nangong family, what did it have to do with Xing Tian? Xiaoyang shook his head helplessly and sighed. Previously, in order to get the pass, we had a condition, which was to protect them once. Chapter 3002. Hearing this, Xing Tian was stunned for a moment. Judging by Xiaoyang's attitude, it seemed like he was going to make a trip there. We are just outsiders with a temporary status. If we get involved in their internal strife, I'm afraid we'll get into a lot of trouble. Xing Tian said helplessly. Although they did get the pass to enter the secret realm because of a deal, getting involved in unnecessary trouble would be a headache for them. It might even be difficult to get out. Even though Xiaoyang hadn't said what exactly happened, Xing Tian was able to figure it out. The people they killed were from Shimen City. If the Nangong family was in trouble, It was obvious that Shimin City was preparing to attack Nangong City in the secret realm. Both sides were part of the 4 cities in the Bright Curse realm. This was not a small matter. Although both sides were not evenly matched, the gap between them was not too big. Therefore, no matter how much Shimin City planned, they might not be able to take down Nangong City directly. Furthermore, Nangong Yu's heart-devouring insect had been completely removed. She was able to display her extraordinary strength. If it's just a normal situation, I won't bother. But a deal is a deal. If I don't know, it's fine. But if I don't go, it's a breach of contract. Xiaoyang took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. On this point, Xiaoyang was more open-minded. Since he had made a promise, there was no reason for him to go back on his words. Xingtian couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Xiaoyang was so strict with the rules, so the consequences would naturally be more trouble. In the Bright Day's secret realm, Xingtian only had one goal. That was to find out whether Mingjun was dead or alive. If he could meet him again, then he would decide who was stronger. But this was only a worry. At the same time, Xingtian was also happy. With Xiaoyang's personality, he would definitely not stab someone in the back. Therefore, it was very comfortable to work with such a person. He would never have to worry about being betrayed and his life being in danger. That's true. Since I've taken benefits from him, I have to remember his good intentions. Xingtian laughed bitterly and said, although Xingtian found it hard to understand Xiaoyang's thoughts, he felt that this was a pretty good idea. Although this kind of honesty would cause you to lose out, it would definitely make people believe you. Moreover, Xiaoyang was not the kind of person who would jump into a hole that others had dug for him. Whether the matter was successful or not, the decision had always been in his hands. Lil Man sat at the side and didn't say anything. She felt that she didn't need to say anything at all. What the young master said and did was right, so why should he waste his time thinking about it? Although it's not to that extent, it's not too far off. Since I said so, I naturally have to do it, Xiaoyang said with a smile. Considering the current situation, Xiaoyang's plan was simple. As long as he helped Nangongqing once, he would have repaid the favor, and they would not owe each other anything in the future, so he would not have to worry about it anymore. After all, there were times when one owed a favor, and when the other party took the initiative to repay it, it was hard to say if it would still be convenient. Furthermore, with Xiaoyang's character, he would not let him go back on his word. As long as it was within reason, he would accept it. Therefore, this time, no matter what, he could not avoid it, and had to help at least once. Furthermore, Nangong Yu's character was not bad. This was also the reason why Xiaoyang was so insistent on helping her. Such a person was extremely rare, and if the world lost such a person, it would indeed be a pity. What kind of information did you get? Xingtian asked hesitantly. Furthermore, looking at Xiaoyang's serious expression, it was not hard to guess that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. In fact, it might even be more complicated than he had imagined. Therefore, how could he not pay more attention to it? It was not wrong to help, but it also depended on whether they were able to do so. If they had to sacrifice their lives in the end, the price would be too great. Westgate City has been very good at managing their guests these past few years. They have found many allies in other worlds, and this time they are preparing to take over Nangong City, Xiaoyang said. Westgate City's ambition was naturally not limited to this, and the weakest Nangong City was only the beginning. If the time was right, they would consider taking over the other 2 cities as well. At that time, the structure of the 4 cities would become 1 city. It could be said that Westgate City's ambition was extremely huge, and for this structure, they had been planning for decades. Linking everything together, it seemed that some things were just like the clouds parting to see the light of day. Looks like Westgate City's offer is not ordinary, or else they would not have been able to recruit so many helpers, Xingtian laughed. Xiaoyang nodded in agreement, as it was indeed so. Immediately, Xiaoyang began to rummage through the storage ring. Although they were currently in the secret realm, they did not know much about this place. Even though he had absorbed the divine souls of the two people and obtained a lot of information from their divine consciousness, without a map, he was like a headless fly scurrying around. If he wanted to find the Nangong family, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, and it would be meaningless. Therefore, how could Xiaoyang not be cautious? After searching for about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Xiaoyang finally found the map of the secret realm. As the second young master of Westgate City, as well as the most pampered son, the things that he possessed were indeed not ordinary. The amount of spiritual stones that he used for his daily expenses was almost enough to fill an entire ring. If he were to release them, Xiaoyang's small courtyard in North Light City might not even be able to hold them. Xiaoyang took out the map, drew a circle on it, and said, "This is where most of the Westgate City's people are gathered." Logically speaking, if they wanted to find the people of Nangong City, they only needed to follow the people of Westgate City, and they would be able to find them. However, their actions had offended Westgate City, and if they followed too closely, they would inevitably be discovered. Furthermore, they were currently within the range of Westgate City, and it was also quite dangerous here. "Have you found the location of Nangong City's camp?" Xing Tian asked. Xing Tian naturally knew the pros and cons of this. If they kept walking on the edge of a knife, it would be easy for them to get into trouble. Furthermore, judging from Xiaoyang's serious expression, it was possible that the problem did not only lie with Westgate City. Perhaps there was also a problem with Nangong City's internal affairs. Xiaoyang nodded and moved his hand to another location. This is the location where Nangong City's people are expected to stay, but Westgate City knows very well that there is a huge problem. Chapter 3003. In other words, there's a traitor in Nangong City. Xing Tian laughed. It had to be said that in the bright curse world, no matter what kind of power it was, they would try to recruit outsiders and turn them into their own force. In this way, the good and the bad were mixed together, and it was not strange for a traitor to sneak in. It was easy to understand. If a force wanted to infiltrate another force, the best way was to start from the outsiders. Because their background was too far away, it was impossible to investigate carefully. As long as they stayed for decades or centuries, there would naturally be trust between them, and there would not be too much suspicion. And this was the most crucial point. When there were too many outsiders, it was impossible to guard against them all the time. If they guarded against them like how they guarded against thieves, it was hard to say when something big would happen, or it would chill people's hearts. Therefore, as long as there was no evidence in their hands, everyone would turn a blind eye to it. In the end, they would just take what they wanted. The Bright Curse World's model naturally had its problems, but the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Therefore, those disadvantages were perfectly covered up, and no one felt that there was anything wrong. Xiaoyang nodded and said, "That's true." "That's easy to say. When the time comes, we just need to inform Nangongyu, and we can leave." Xing Tian said casually. Xiaoyang did not say anything. If only things were that simple. Even if he told Nangongyu this news, it was another matter whether she would believe it or not. It was either they did not interfere in this matter, or once they did, they naturally had to do it well. Moreover, because of the second young master, there was a grudge between them and Shimen City. If they could borrow Nangong Cheng's hand to knock them down, it seemed to be a good choice. However, it wasn't that easy to put it into practice. The second young master was the most doted son of the Shimen family head, but the information he knew was very limited. Therefore, Xiaoyang could not unravel everything in a short time. In this way, the one with a headache was still Xiaoyang. No matter how one looked at it, it was not easy to break out of this situation. Xiaoyang smiled bitterly and helplessly. It seemed that it was impossible to resolve this matter peacefully. After that, Xiaoyang withdrew the stately painting from his bosom and passed it to Xiaoman. He said, "If you notice that the situation isn't right, then hide in it." Lil Man took the stately painting timidly, his eyes full of doubt. She also knew that her young master's seriousness meant that the following matter would be very risky. If she didn't avoid it, her life might be in danger. Of course, in Xiao Yang's opinion, Lil Man's life was the most important and nothing could go wrong. With the stately painting by his side, he would be safer. The corner of Xing Tian's eyes twitched as he watched from the side. He had naturally witnessed the miraculous effects of the mountain river map. Such a treasure could be said to be an unparalleled, life-saving treasure. Moreover, the reason why he was traveling with Xiaoyang was because of this. It was equivalent to having an extra route of retreat. The safest route of retreat was given to Lil Man. From this, one could see how much Xiaoyang valued and trusted her. Then, Xiaoyang whispered the method of using the stately painting to Lil Man. Xing Tian acted like a gentleman and turned around to leave. After all, the chance of the stately painting could not be known by outsiders. Otherwise, the treasure would not be so useful. In this aspect, Xing Tian knew his limits. He would naturally tell him what he should know. If he shouldn't know, then he would stay away and not listen to a single word. This feeling made Xing Tian feel very comfortable. He even had the illusion that he had become a little more like a human, and not a beast that drank raw meat and drank blood. Thinking about this, Xing Tian bitterly smiled helplessly. Being a human was truly tiring. There were so many rules and regulations that bound him. As for those who did not follow the rules, being a human was just a title. Lil Man's talent was also very good. Adding on the fact that she was following Xiaoyang, the stately painting was also a little familiar with it. In less than half an incense's time, she had mastered it. It was naturally difficult to use the treasures in the painting, but it was not a problem for her to enter and leave freely. After planning, the three of them quickly headed to the place where Nangong City could possibly be stationed. That place was labeled as the Cloud Valley. The Cloud Valley was also the place where the Nangong family started. The Almighty of the Nangong family had previously found a great opportunity in the Cloud Valley. Hence, after leaving, their cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds. Then they occupied Nangong City and formed its embryonic form. Of course, to be able to bring Nangong City to greater heights, it was through the efforts of several generations that it became the current situation. In the bright incantation world, many things were deeply rooted. It was common for a genius to appear out of nowhere. However, to create a powerful force with the strength of a single person was almost impossible. Even if you were strong, you could only be strong for a short period of time. Before long as other forces used some tricks, you could easily fall apart. Hence, in the past tens of thousands of years, the saying of the 2 sects, 3 clans, and 4 cities had never changed. Along the way, they would also encounter some cultivators. However, they did not bother with each other. After all, there were many people looking for opportunities in the secret realm. As long as no one took the initiative to cause trouble, they would go their own way and not disturb each other. Furthermore, the time to look for opportunities was the most important. Everyone would not fight each other for no reason and fight until their heads bled. Otherwise, when the time came and they missed the real opportunity, that would be the most unacceptable thing. Along the way, Lil Man remained silent. However, in her heart, she was constantly familiarizing herself with the usage of the chaotic origin, mysterious spear, and the stately painting. After all, these 2 were supreme-grade spiritual weapons. If they were used properly, the power that could be unleashed would be extraordinary. Lil Man did not know how great the risk would be next. However, she knew very well that if she could help share the young master's burden, that would be the best. After some time, they followed the mark on the map and arrived at the outskirts of the Cloud Valley. Xiaoyang was not in a hurry to enter. Instead, he stopped in his tracks and took out 3 human skin masks and put them on. Looking at the human skin masks, Xing Tian's lips curled up in disdain. However, on second thought, if they were to walk in like this, it would be inevitable for them to cause some trouble. They had some conflicts with Shiman City. It was not impossible for them to use this as an excuse to make things difficult for Nangong City. Being so cautious even when returning a favor, no one else can do this. Xingtian let out a bitter laugh helplessly and said. Xiao Yang also shook his head helplessly. It was better to be safe. Chapter 3004. At a glance, this cloud valley was indeed a bit like a valley. It was a very long valley. Above the valley, it was covered with white clouds. Below it, it was even more radiant and bright. Anyone who could take a leisurely stroll through the cloud valley without any flaws in their mental state would be the most terrifying. Just as they reached the entrance of the cloud valley, two men in green robes walked over. Clearly, they wanted to block their path and prevent them from approaching. The robes of the two men had the Nangong family's emblem. It was likely that the Nangong family had ordered them to guard this place and not allow outsiders to enter. Fellow Taoists, this cloud valley is where our Nangong city is stationed. Please take a detour. One of the men looked rather friendly and his tone was very patient. Xiao Yang smiled and said, Does this cloud valley belong to your Nangong family? Once those words were said, the person who spoke earlier frowned and appeared displeased. Although the cloud valley did not clearly state that it belonged to their Nangong family, every time the secret realm opened, the Nangong family would occupy this place. Everyone had a very good tacit understanding. As long as a certain faction occupied a place, it would naturally be their private territory. If you are not convinced by this, then use your strength to speak for yourself. The Cloud Valley belongs to our Nangong family. You'd better know your place and not risk your life. The other person did not seem to be so easy to talk to. His tone was even filled with anger, as if he was about to start a fight at the slightest disagreement. Xingtian pretended to be very scared. It seemed that no matter what kind of faction it was, there would always be a few arrogant and despotic people. Of course, they also appeared to be a little idiotic. They spoke and did things with a frivolous heart. One day, they would suffer a great loss. Of course, the Bright Curse Realm and the others would not be like that. Each of them was very clever and knew that those people could be provoked and those that could not be provoked. Xiao Yang frowned slightly. From the looks of it, it would not be easy to logically enter. Of course, Xiao Yang had also thought of taking out the pass that Nangong Yu had given them. It had the Nangong family's mark on it. At that time, they would naturally be able to enter. But in this way, it would be meaningless for them to wear masks. Even if they didn't reveal themselves, they would still be divined. After all, there were only 3 people who could take away the entry token from the Nangong clan without knowing their background. Moreover, they were keeping a low profile in order to avoid Westgate City. Moreover, they didn't want the spies to know their whereabouts. Only by hiding in the dark would they be able to do things better. Fellow Taoists, please don't be angry. We're outsiders and don't know much about this place. We'll take our leave now. Xiao Yang cupped his hands. The person from before scratched his head in a somewhat embarrassed manner and said, Actually, it is not impossible for all of you to make a trip to the Cloud Valley. However, our big brother is cultivating inside and we are afraid that trouble might arise. That is why we are guarding this place. As long as you don't enter the Cloud Valley, you can just watch from both sides. The other person glared at the young man, clearly dissatisfied. What was the use of saying so much to an outsider? If these 3 people were here to scout for information, it was hard to say what kind of trouble they would cause once they were found out. Seeing this, the young man didn't say anything else, afraid that the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. If he delayed the important matter, he would really die 1,000 deaths. It's best if you don't wander around the Cloud Valley. You can enjoy the scenery, but if you dare to covet the opportunities here or have any other intentions, you'll have to bear the consequences. The domineering young man said fiercely. Xiao Yang looked as if he had been taught a lesson. Then he led Xingtian and Xiao Man on a detour and began to fly up the mountain in the valley. Since there were people cultivating in the Cloud Valley, they naturally couldn't disturb them. After all, they didn't have any enmity with them. However, to dare to cultivate in the daytime secret realm, this person's temperament was truly not for show. He was indeed powerful. In the daytime secret realm, if one were to be careless and lose one's guard, one could easily become a living corpse. These people were truly crazy. However, the Nangong clan relied on the Cloud Valley to rise up. They must have their own experience in this area, which was why they were so confident. After ascending the mountain, they could see a few scattered cultivators at a glance. However, they were all resting and not doing anything. Right now, most of the Nangong clan members had probably entered the Cloud Valley to cultivate or search for opportunities. It was unknown where that city, Lord Nangong, was now. Not long later, Xiaoyang saw a camp. Intersecting with each other and combining it with what he saw on the map, that was where Nangong Chung was stationed. The camp was very big and could at least hold a few hundred people. On the surface, there was no one guarding it. However, whether there were spies in the dark, that was unknown. Looking at Nangong Cheng's carelessness, Xiaoyang only frowned slightly. Then he released his divine sense and entered the camp. Whether Nangong Yu was inside or not, he would know after checking. In this aspect, Xiaoyang was still rather confident. As long as he paid attention, it would be hard for others to discover him. Suddenly, the corner of Xiaoyang's mouth curled up into a smile. Nangong Yu was sitting in the main tent, flipping through ancient books. She seemed to be a little anxious. In such a large camp, there were only a few people stationed in it. In the end, it was only a place to stay. To them, whether they could find their own opportunities in the Cloud Valley was the most important thing. However, the Cloud Valley had been developed by the Nangong clan for many generations. Naturally, there were very few opportunities left in the Cloud Valley. This was not something he could be concerned about. After communicating with Nangong Yu, Xiaoyang retracted his divine sense. "Let's go," Xiaoyang said and walked forward. Xingtian and Xiaoman followed closely behind. At the same time, they were concealing their auras so that others would not be able to detect them. In such a big camp, there were only Nangong Yu and a few low-level martial emperors. Hence, it was not difficult to avoid them. After bypassing a few more obvious places, the three of them successfully entered the camp. Of course, the moment they stepped into the camp, they were discovered by Nangong Yu. However, because they had communicated with each other earlier, they did not cause any trouble. If they had not informed her beforehand, Nangong Yu would have charged out directly. Unnecessary misunderstandings could naturally be smoothed over with a few words. However, once some things were exposed, it was possible that they would never be able to recover. When that time comes, their actions would definitely reveal even more. The so-called precautions would also be for naught. When Xiaoyang and the other two entered the camp, Nangong Yu was stunned for a moment, as if she did not recognize the three of them. Chapter 3005. Mayor Nangong, how have you been? Xiaoyang spoke first, breaking the silence. Although Nangong Yu was still a little hesitant, she could tell from the voice that this was indeed her benefactor. But why was the change in his appearance so great? Of course, Nangong Yu did not find it strange. She only thought that the face at the bottom was the real Xiaoyang. Or perhaps the face that she had seen before was not the real one? May I know why fellow Xiao has come to visit me this time? Nangong Yu laughed awkwardly as she asked. It was naturally not bad to be more vigilant when going out. Not showing one's true face was also considered self-protection. There was nothing wrong with that. Nangong Yu had a good impression of Xiaoyang. After all, it was rare to see such a straightforward person. Doing business with such a person was very worry-free. In addition, the heart-devouring cicada was taken care of. This made Nangong Yu even more grateful. With such a huge problem solved, she, Nangong Yu, would not have to live in despair in the future, where she could only wait for death to come. It's time to fulfill the second condition I gave you. Xiaoyang sat down casually and said indifferently. Nangong Yu's eyes widened in shock when she heard this. She clearly remembered that Xiaoyang said that he would help the Nangong family once in the secret realm of light. Now that he was here, Did he not come because he heard some news? But even she, Nan Gongyu, did not receive any news. Then where did this danger come from? Who is coveting my Nangongqing? Nan Gongyu frowned and said softly. Nan Gongyu naturally knew that many forces in the bright curse world wanted to replace him, but almost none of them could do it. In the outside world, it was naturally very difficult to have such thoughts. However, in the secret realm, the situation would naturally change. Previously, we met the second young master of Westgate City. Coincidentally, we got into a conflict and killed a few of his men. Xiaoyang said indifferently. Nan Gongyu's mouth twitched when she heard this. In that case, Xiaoyang and the other two were not here to protect the Nangong family, but to seek refuge? However, even if this was the case, Nan Gongyu didn't think much of it. Since Xiaoyang had saved her life, this time becoming enemies with Shimin City wasn't a big deal. Moreover, their relationship with Westgate City was not good in the first place. If they wanted to start a war, then so be it. In any case, no one could do anything to the other. At the same time, Xiaoyang waved his hand and set up a layer of restriction in an instant. Although they had already investigated this place, they still had to be on guard. If the walls had ears, the situation would become very bad. Daoist Xingtian killed Zhang Xuanji, Xiaoyang said. Nan Gongyu looked at Xingtian, her eyes filled with shock. She then looked at the young man, who did not seem to have suffered any serious injuries. Deducing from this, just how terrifying would his strength be? To be able to kill a veteran 7th-level powerhouse in the prime of his youth, this ability was still worthy of recognition. Coincidentally, in order to obtain some information, I checked Zhang Xuanji's soul again. Who knew that I would discover an incredible secret? Xiaoyang said with a smile. When he said this, Nan Gongyu's face instantly turned serious. How could Nan Gongyu not understand when he had already said this? They had always been at odds with Shimin City, and it could even be said that they had a hostile relationship. When a war broke out between the two, it was reasonable and no one would find it strange. However, what Nan Gongyu didn't expect was that they would choose to attack in the secret realm of daylight. When are they going to attack? Nan Gongyu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. At the same time, Nan Gongyu was glad that Xiaoyang had helped her solve the problem of the heart-devouring cicada, which was why she was able to enter the secret realm. Otherwise, once Shimin City attacked the younger generation of Nangong City, they would probably be defeated, since they already knew the other party's goal. As long as they were prepared, there wouldn't be any big problems. When they attack is not the key. After all, the difference in strength between the two of you isn't that big. Once a fight breaks out, the other party's losses won't be small, so they won't act rashly, Xiaoyang said. Nan Gongyu nodded with a smile. If a fight broke out, she really wasn't afraid. Even if Nangong City was unable to recover from this setback, she would make sure that Shimin City wouldn't be any better. At most, everyone would fall from the position of the 4 cities. So what? Fellow Xiao, don't keep me in suspense. If you have something to say, just say it, Nan Gongyu said with a simple and honest smile. Shimin City wouldn't be so stupid as to use a fight against them. Therefore, there was definitely something fishy going on. Therefore, where the problem was, they had to know clearly before they could be sure. If I say this because of this, I'm afraid, City, Lord Nangong will think that I'm trying to sow discord, Xiaoyang shrugged helplessly and said. Those guests had been friends with Nan Gongyu for tens or even hundreds of years, but they only knew each other for a short period of time. Naturally, it was hard to say who to trust. Hearing this, Nan Gongyu's expression instantly turned serious, and her eyes were filled with shock. Although Xiaoyang hadn't said anything, Nan Gongyu already had some calculations in her heart. Although Nan Gongyu had been suffering from the heart-devouring cicada for the past tens of years and was unable to cultivate because of that, she still had a lot of time to analyze people's hearts. It could be said that in these tens of years, Nan Gongyu had analyzed all the important people in Nangong City. He buried these things in his heart. After all, These things couldn't be said out loud, and he only needed to look at them. Of course, these things were prepared for the future city lord to hear. However, because the heart-devouring cicada was removed, he didn't have to worry about his life. Therefore, it was better to bury these things in his heart. Fellow Shao, just say it. If you know anything, it's a kindness to tell me. As for how I see it, I can only judge after hearing it. Nangongyu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Although sometimes reality was very cruel, she had to face it. Xing Tian had been paying attention to the changes in Nangongyu's expression. Soon after, he shook his head helplessly. This guy's straightforwardness was only on the surface. In reality, he was also a scheming person. It was just that he wouldn't show it on the surface and let others think that he was that kind of person. From Zhang Xuanji's divine sense, I found out that before Zhao Yunfu joined Nangong City, they already knew each other, Xiaoyang said indifferently. Chapter 3006. Nangongyu frowned slightly when he heard this, and there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. The bright curse realm was an open world, and it was very welcoming of outsiders. Therefore, Zhang Xuanji and Zhao Yunbu knew each other before, but this did not mean anything. After all, it was normal for them to know each other before. Even if they were born in the same world, it was not strange. Therefore, it was a bit rash to insist that Zhao Yunbu was a spy. This was only Xiaoyang's one-sided statement, so Nangongyu naturally would not refute it. However, it was impossible for him to completely believe it. Nangongyu was not a person who did not have his own opinions. Once he listened to someone, he would listen to the wind and the rain. As for the information he received, he still needed to decide on his own. No one could help him make the decision. I also know another thing from Zhang Xuanji's divine sense. That is, Westgate City is cooperating with a force from another world. They are proficient in the art of poison goo. Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. As soon as he said this, Nangongyu's expression suddenly became a little unnatural. If what Xiaoyang said was true, and this information was obtained from Zhang Xuanji's divine sense, then Zhao Yunbu was indeed more suspicious. Now that he thought about how Zhao Yunbu had been hostile to Xiaoyang after the heart-devouring cicada had been removed, he felt that this was very abrupt. In this way, it seemed that some things could be linked together, and it did not seem strange anymore. Nangongyu rubbed his forehead. At that time, he also suspected Zhao Yunbu, but thinking that the other party had gone through trials and tribulations together, he did not think too much about it. But now it could not be said that the evidence was irrefutable. However, based on the information provided by Xiaoyang, Zhao Yunbu was indeed more suspicious. Thank you, Brother Xiao, for telling me this information. I am very grateful. Nangongyu said in a low voice. Nangongyu still found it difficult to accept such information for a while. But many times, for the sake of benefits, what could not be done? It was not impossible to plan for decades or even centuries. Furthermore, if Nangongcheng wanted to avoid trouble, he had to be extremely careful. As the castellan, every decision he made was related to the rise and fall of Nangong City. A single wrong step could lead Nangong City into the abyss or even beyond redemption. Nangong City was indeed a huge force with deep roots. However, with the meticulous planning of the enemy, it was not difficult for Shimen City to dig out all the roots of the fallen tree. As such, Nangongcheng was indeed in a precarious situation. Is Dao friend Xiao here to inform us of the news? Nangongyu asked hesitantly. Although Nangongyu would more or less be on guard against Zhao Yunbu in the future, Zhao Yunbu's usefulness and battle prowess could not be ignored. Even if his sneak attack failed and he turned around to help Shimen City, at that time, even Nangong City would not be able to resist. Thus, Zhao Yunbu was more or less a balancing point. The usefulness of a 7th rank cultivator could not be ignored. Xiaoyang shook his head and said, I will stay for a while. As for whether I can help you when the time comes, I don't know. If West Wind City continued to patiently endure and not make a move, Xiaoyang naturally had no reason to continue to stay. Zhao Yunbu has yet to meet up with us after entering the secret territory. Nan Gongyu said in a low voice. Previously, Nan Gongyu thought that the other party must have wanted to search for opportunities by himself and did not want to be restrained by Nangong City. However, it seemed that things were not as simple as she had imagined. There was something fishy going on, and it caused everyone to tremble with fear. Then I don't know. Zhang Xuanji seems to have been marginalized, so she doesn't know much. Xiaoyang said with a bitter smile. Furthermore, the information obtained from other people's divine souls would be somewhat lacking, so there was no other way. Perhaps that second young master would know a little more. It was a pity that he did not know about this at that time, so he let that trash go. Of course, Xiaoyang had other reasons for staying, and that was to exchange blows with those cultivators who were proficient in the art of poisonous insects. Since the other party was able to take out a high-grade treasure, like the heart-devouring cicada, they might have other brilliant methods. Perhaps he could even obtain a considerable amount of income. Although Xiaoyang had previously cultivated the bloodthirsty ice silkworm that could refine poison, but because of its aptitude, it was somewhat useless now. Although the Moe jade lotus and the heart-devouring cicada could help Xiaoyang get through this period, but when it came to poisons, especially high-grade poisons, the more the better. A storm is coming. Nan Gongyu paced back and forth on the spot, her face full of worry. Previously, Nan Gongyu did not receive any news, now that she suddenly knew that Westgate City would attack them, but did not make any arrangements. This caused Nan Gongyu to be at a loss. As for whether Xiaoyang and the other two would help, Nan Gongyu did not have much hope. After all, they might leave at any time. At that time, Nan Gongyu would still have to face Westgate City's attack. Furthermore, according to Xiaoyang's words, Westgate City had done a good job in recruiting reinforcements from other worlds. In this aspect, Nan Gongyu was afraid that it would be difficult for Nan Gongyu to compete with them. As such, things seemed to be even more difficult. Mayor Nan Gong, you don't have to worry too much. Next, please arrange an identity for us, so that we won't be exposed by others. Furthermore, if we kill Zhang Xuanji and let Lu Xinyu escape, Westgate City will inevitably make an issue out of it. At that time, the one in a dilemma will only be you. Xiaoyang said. Nan Gongyu nodded. She understood the pros and cons of this. Xiaoyang and the others' current identities were very awkward, and it was indeed difficult to verify if what he said was true. If their identities could be concealed, or if they were to disappear quietly, no one would be too concerned. Please suppress your cultivation to 5th level Martial Emperor. When the time comes, I will tell my subordinates that the two of you are old friends that I met during my travels in other worlds. Nan Gongyu said with a smile. Xiaoyang nodded. This arrangement was naturally the best. Being friends in other worlds was the best way. Even if others wanted to investigate, they would not be able to find out anything. If that's the case, if there's nothing else, we will go out for a walk and wait for you to meet us. Xiaoyang said with a smile. Nan Gongyu nodded. It was never tiring to talk to smart people. Everyone understood what she meant. Chapter 3007. After quietly leaving the tent, Xiaoyang, Xingtian, and the rest walked around the periphery. Everything was going according to their plan. After bumping into an old friend in the secret realm, Mayor Nangong invited the three of them into Mayor Nangong's tent to catch up with each other. Naturally, Xiaoyang and the other two stayed in Nangong City's tent. In addition, they had deliberately changed their appearance and voice, so no one suspected anything. City Lord Nangong had always been unparalleled, so it was normal for him to make many friends outside. Moreover, City Lord Nangong was a hospitable person, so there was nothing wrong with letting three old friends stay. As a result, everyone felt that this was normal. In the following days, Xiaoyang stayed in the tent peacefully. He wanted to see what kind of storm Westgate City could stir up. Xiaoyang was also very helpless about this. If they could take down Lu Xinyu, they might be able to extract the silk from the cocoon, or even launch a counterattack on Westgate City. But now, because of the lack of information, they could not do anything. They could only continue to wait and see. At the same time, they also began to analyze the power structure of Westgate City. In fact, the power structure of Westgate City and Nangong City was not much different. They were both formed by the main family, local cultivators, and foreign guests. The foreign guests of Westgate City were led by Zhang Xuanji and the others. They were the powerful people of many worlds who came here to seek refuge. There were also two forces among the foreign guests, but they could not be called foreign guests. They had some intention of cooperation. One was Lu Xinyu and the others. They appeared and disappeared mysteriously and almost never appeared in the bright curse world. It was as if they were just there in name, but the respect they received was greater than most of the foreign guests. The other force was the cultivators who were skilled in the art of poison, but they had never appeared in the bright day's secret realm. West Wind City must have deliberately placed them in the dark to ensure that they could play a role at the crucial moment. If Xiaoyang had not searched Zhang Xuanji's divine sense, he most likely would not know anything about this. After many rounds of inference, if Westgate City could really mobilize the manpower of the other two factions, then they would also be a huge monster now. Perhaps they could even compete with the three factions. However, cooperative relationships had always been an uncertain factor. If one's own strength wasn't enough, perhaps the cooperation would become a knife hanging over one's head. After a brief analysis of the matter, he said some irrelevant things. The two people standing guard outside Yungu were members of the Nangong family. The one who was easier to talk to was called Nangong Yong, while the one who was more aggressive was called Nangong Shao. Yungu was a place of utmost importance. As such, if it was not guarded by her own people, it would be very difficult for Nangong Yu to feel at ease. The strength of those two wasn't bad, being sixth-order experts. Even if they couldn't defeat an expert, they could at least delay for a while. Furthermore, with Nangong Yu personally overseeing this place, who would dare to be impudent? Anyone below the three-clan gate would have to think twice before trying to compete with Nangong Cheng. Nangong Yu had also once invited Xiaoyang and the other two to enter Yungu to take a look and see if they could find their own opportunities. However, he was rather disinterested and did not go. Xiao Man naturally followed her young master. Instead, it was Xing Tian who felt bored and wanted to go in. There was indeed someone cultivating in Yungu, and it was Nangong Yu's only son, Nangong Wenxin. Because Nangong Wenxin was the only son, he was naturally the first in line to inherit the position of Nangong City's city lord. In the future, this was naturally a matter that was set in stone. However, because his father was seriously ill, Nangong Wenxin had no choice but to cultivate diligently. If something really happened, even if he became the city lord, he would not be able to hold on to his position. When that time came, Nangong City would definitely fall into turmoil, and might even suffer great losses due to internal strife. Therefore, Nangong Wenxin had no other choice but to focus on cultivation and see if he could break through to 7th Order Martial Emperor. Once he stepped into this realm, those old people in the same sect naturally wouldn't covet him in the slightest. They might even lend him a hand, and many of his troubles would naturally be resolved. Everything was built with strength, and only with strength could one convince others more easily. Regarding the Nangong clan situation, Xiaoyang only nodded his head and did not put it to heart. After this deal was settled, he would probably not have much interaction with Nangong City in the future. One had to admit that Nangong Wenxin's talent was not bad, but it was a pity that he was still young. He was only 300 years old, and he was already able to cultivate to such a level. It could be said that he was a genius. There were even some who said that Nangong Wenxin would definitely reach 7th Order Martial Emperor in this life, and would not live past 1,000 years. If this kid could focus on cultivation, he might even reach a higher level, and be able to compete with the old monsters of the two sections. However, these were all just jokes, and it was hard to say if they would come true. Every 100 years, there would be geniuses appearing like carps crossing the river, but the number of people who could reach the top could be counted with one's fingers. Luck and hard work were both indispensable. After an unknown period of time, Xiaoyang also met an old acquaintance, Sun Yi. When Sun Yi came to visit, they only exchanged a few simple words and did not talk about anything else. This was also Sun Yi's principle. He needed to keep a low profile most of the time. If he stood out too much, it would be easy for him to get into trouble. After all, it was not easy for an outsider like him to become the head reverend. And if he made a mistake, who knew what would happen to him? If he were to be like Zhao Yunbu, forcefully suppressing the local cultivators and leading the local cultivators, that would be very bad. Sun Yi was very clear about his position, and thus his life had always been smooth sailing. It was easy for people to overlook him, so no one would target him. It could be said that when Xiaoyang said that there was a spy in Nangong City, the first person that Nangong Yu suspected was Sun Yi, because this person was too low profile, to the point that he did not have the temperament of a seventh-order cultivator. Thus, one could not help but suspect that he had hidden his intentions so deeply. As for whether or not Sun Yi was also a spy from Westgate City, even Xiaoyang could not confirm this point. After all, without receiving accurate information, one could not speak carelessly. Sometimes unintentional words could cause another person to fall into the abyss. Furthermore, no matter how low Sun Yi's presence was, he was still a seventh-order cultivator, and if he was framed, it was not impossible for him to betray them. After a period of time, many people came out from the Cloud Valley. Some were full of smiles, while others were full of worry. This camp also started to become lively because of this. Not long after, Zhao Yunbu also returned. Chapter 3008. After Zhao Yunfu returned, everything was normal, as if nothing had happened. Nangong Yu did not confront him. After all, this was just a groundless accusation. Before the other party revealed himself, she could not alert him. Otherwise, when Westgate City's plan changed again, it might become even more brilliant. At that time, it would be impossible to guard against. Zhao Yunfu was an old friend of the city lord, so he naturally came to pay him a visit. I wonder which world fellow Chun is from? Zhao Yunfu asked with a smile. Zhao Yunfu also felt that this old friend of his was a little strange. It was indeed surprising for someone to appear at such a critical time. The reason why he was called Fellow Qin was because Xiaoyang was using the name of his old friend, Qin Mingho. Xiaoyang smiled and said, "An unknown small world. Let's not talk about it." Then why isn't Fellow Qin working for Nangong City and not Nangong City? Zhao Yunfu continued to ask. It seemed that Zhao Yunfu would not give up until he got an answer. Immediately, Xiaoyang's eyebrows furrowed slightly. He was even a little angry. This guy's overbearing attitude really made people unhappy. However, he almost got into a fight with him when he was Xiaoyang, so it wasn't too strange when he thought about it. After all, their plan had reached a critical point. Zhao Yunfu probably did not want to see any accidents happen. Therefore, no matter how suspicious it was, he wanted to investigate it thoroughly to ensure that their plan could be carried out smoothly. Why is Brother Zhao asking about this? Nangong Yu was a little unhappy and pretended to be angry. Although Xiaoyang was a careful person, if he spoke too much, it was inevitable that he would reveal some flaws. Moreover, Xiaoyang did not say which world he was from. Obviously, he did not know much about the surrounding worlds. However, Zhao Yunfu was different. He had been traveling around the surrounding worlds and knew most of the powerful beings like the back of his hand. Therefore, if he said something wrong, he would be suspected. City Lord, this is the secret realm of daylight. We have to be careful. If we meet someone who tries to trip us up, it won't be good, Zhao Yunfu said. Now, Zhao Yunbu looked like a person who was wholeheartedly devoted to Nangongcheng, causing others to sigh in admiration. Nangongcheng was truly fortunate to have the help of someone like Zhao Yunbu. Mayor, Elder Zhao is doing this for Nangong City. What he said is true. Nangong Shao said. Nangong, you only smiled and said, "What? Do you still not trust this city lord?" As soon as this was said, everyone immediately smiled apologetically and didn't continue to dwell on this issue. After all, if they said too much and the city lord got angry, everyone would inevitably feel embarrassed. When Xiaoyang saw that Nangongyu had suppressed this topic, he did not think too much about it. It was better not to say anything if he could. Why waste his breath? Xiao Man didn't say anything, but she was now Chun Mingho's junior sister. "City Lord, please calm your anger. I was overthinking things. Please forgive me," Zhao Yun said with a smile. Although the welcoming banquet for Zhao Yunbu could be said to be joyous and harmonious, he didn't seem to be very happy. However, Zhao Yunbu did not take it to heart. The other party was only a 6th Order Martial King and a 3rd Order Martial King. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they wouldn't be able to do much. At least, with his ability, it was very easy to suppress them. The following time was also very peaceful. Those who wanted to enter the Cloud Valley to search for opportunities were not stopped, and they could just go ahead. However, since everyone had already gone there once, there was naturally not much meaning in going there again. Therefore, they felt a little depressed. Of course, this was only temporary. Their Nangong City's exploration range was not only limited to the Cloud Valley. This was only the beginning. Later on, they would naturally head in other directions. Everything was as usual, as if there was nothing strange about it. "Young master, that Zhao Yunbu seems to have a problem with us," Xiao Man said with some dissatisfaction. At the same time, Xiao Man could not understand why Zhao Yunbu would still have such a problem with them even though they had changed their faces and identities. This made people feel very strange. Xiao Yang put down the scroll in his hand and said he is just being cautious. However, because he is overly cautious, he has forgotten what he is doing. Perhaps Zhao Yunbu had always been like this in the past, so everyone did not find it strange. However, in Xiaoyang's eyes, these actions seemed a little too deliberate. "I heard that many people in Nangong City have already left the Cloud Valley to search for their own opportunities in other places. Are we still going to continue staying here?" Xiao Man asked. Xiaoyang nodded. Since Zhao Yunbu had returned, if they really had any plans, they would probably take action during this period of time. Even if we want to leave, we have to wait until Xingtian returns. Xiaoyang said. Since they had come together, they naturally had to leave without saying goodbye. Xiao Man nodded. That was indeed the case. However, based on her understanding of the young master, since he was prepared to take care of this matter, he would naturally not leave it at that. Giving up halfway was not Xiaoyang's character. Nangong City's camp was bustling with activity for a while. Then, Nangongyu began to arrange for everyone to leave the camp and search for opportunities in other places. However, this time there was no clear target. This made everyone feel a little strange. However, everyone felt that the city lord had just recovered from his illness, so it was normal for them to not think too much about it. Furthermore, Nangongyu's painstaking efforts were also very clear. That was for those who were not strong enough to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, once a battle broke out here, many people would lose their lives. As for those cultivators who were slightly weaker, they would not be of much help even if they stayed here. They would only lose their lives for nothing. Even if Nangongcheng was defeated in the end, at least there would be some bloodline left for the Nangong family. As for whether Sun Yi should stay or leave, it had always been a knot in Nangongyu's heart. If Sun Yi was one of his men, then it would be a great help. If not, then it would be a disaster. However, on second thought, if Sun Yi really was one of their men, then it did not matter whether he stayed or left. After a period of time, Nangongyu could no longer sit still after making all the necessary arrangements. She gathered everyone and prepared to knock some sense into Zhao Yunbu to see what he was planning. Xiaoyang could only let out a wry smile after hearing the news. At the same time, he was sure that Nangongyu must have received some information, or else she would not be so rash. "I've heard that Brother Zhao and Zhang Xuanji of Shimen City have known each other for hundreds of years. Is this rumor true? Nangong, you seem to have said it intentionally. Chapter 3009. Hearing this, Zhao Yunfu could not help but be stunned. No matter what he did after coming to the Bright Curse realm, he was very cautious. He did not even contact that person in private. It could be said that Zhao Yunfu's image in the Bright Curse realm was dedicated to Nangongcheng. Although his actions were a little extreme at times, it was all for Nangongcheng. It was a flaw in his character. But how did City Lord Nangong know about this? Or was it that some things had been exposed? Suddenly, Zhao Yunfu's gaze fell on the senior brother and sister named Chen Mingho. Their appearance here was rather abrupt. Therefore, City Lord Nangong's sudden suspicion was probably related to them. Zhao Yunfu smiled bitterly and said, "Before coming to the Bright Curse realm, Zhang Xuanji and I had indeed traveled to some places together." Nangong, you also saw the slight change in Zhao Yunfu's expression. The smile at the corner of her mouth was more or less playful. This guy seemed to be more than stubborn. However, there were some things that could not be said too early. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. City Lord, you should be careful of those old friends that you haven't seen for a long time. When they met, they were indeed sincere. However, as time passed, who knows if they suddenly appeared with ulterior motives? Zhao Yunfu said lightly. At this time, Zhao Yunfu still wanted to bite back. At the same time, he looked at the senior brother and sister pair with disgust. These two guys were really good at stirring up trouble. However, with just a few words, they wanted to make his position in the city Lord's heart fall to rock bottom? If that was the case, it was a little too whimsical. It was impossible. It could only be said that it was a fantasy. With just a few words, they wanted to change the situation. Was that possible? There were some things that couldn't be changed. If Xiao Yang's origin was really like that, Nangong would naturally be suspicious. However, that was not the reason. Therefore, he could not help but take another look at Zhao Yunfu. This guy was not simple. However, it seemed that it was not possible to get hold of his weakness. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, pretended to be ignorant. It was as if he was not affected by Zhao Yunfu's words. Zhao Yunfu had been observing the expressions of the senior brother and junior sister the entire time. When he saw that they didn't seem to care, his heart sank even more. If this information was not passed to Nangong by these two people, who else could it be? For a moment, Zhao Yunbu was in a bit of a dilemma. Right now, he really couldn't tell who was stabbing him in the back. If he couldn't find the source, then it would be too uncomfortable. This was akin to not knowing who he was fighting with. He was always in a passive position, and he did not know how to deal with it. Brother Zhao is right. This city lord will take note of that. As Nangong spoke, she was full of smiles as she looked at Zhao Yunbu. It was as if his eyes could see through everything. No matter what happened, nothing could escape his eyes. Being stared at like this, Zhao Yunfu felt his hair stand on end, as if something had been exposed. It was just that the city lord didn't want to make a big fuss out of their old friendship and gave him a chance to come clean. Taking the lead and not saying anything after that was the most unbearable thing to do. This was because he didn't know how much information the other party had and how he should mediate. Only then could he make his situation safer. At this moment, Zhao Yunfu was gnashing his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. City Lord, have you investigated the origins of these two fellow Taoists? Zhao Yunfu asked with a smile. Since he didn't know who his opponent was, he might as well change the topic. Perhaps he could even divert the other party's attention. Xiao Yang was still smiling and didn't say anything. Even if the other party brazenly poured water on him, he wouldn't be afraid. Nangong nodded and said, "Brother Zhao, don't worry. I know the origins of these two people." This left Zhao Yunfu speechless. He knew that if he continued to insist, it would appear as if he had a guilty conscience. If he continued to speak, it would more or less seem like he was quibbling. Although Xiao Man was a bit angry, she didn't act out. She had learned to not show her emotions. This was something she had learned very well. Moreover, at this juncture, without her young master's permission, she naturally didn't dare to act rashly. City Lord, it's not strange that Elder Zhao and Zhang Xuanji are old friends. We can't criticize him just because he's against Shimen City, right? Nangong Xiao couldn't stand it anymore and said. Nangong Yu nodded with a smile and said, Xiao is right. However, I'm wondering if we can use this relationship to ease the relationship between Shimen City and us. Nangong Xiao nodded. If that was the case, it would work. Although they were like fire and water with Shimen City, Nangong City was unavoidably weaker compared to them. Moreover, it wasn't a good idea to continue this stalemate. Although I'm old friends with Zhang Xuanji, that was hundreds of years ago. It's not possible to use this to change the relationship between the two cities, Zhao Yunfu said. Regarding this, Nangong Yu naturally didn't have much hope. After all, the other party's butcher's knife was almost on his neck. Wasn't it nonsense to want to reconcile with them? There's something that I was muddle-headed about and didn't listen to Brother Zhao's advice. Therefore, I had no choice but to admit defeat. As Nangong Yu said this, she took a sip of wine and appeared very melancholic. Hearing this, Xiaoyang frowned. He also felt that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. What's the matter? Zhao Yunfu was also a little confused. Nangong Yu seemed to have an infinitely melancholic matter. She was very hesitant and looked like she wanted to say something, but stopped. His actions made him even more unable to understand what he was thinking. City Lord, what's the matter that's making you so conflicted? Nangong Xiao asked anxiously. Everyone was also very curious and wanted to know what was going on. Nangong Yu was conflicted for a long time before she slowly said, That Xiaoyang is indeed a liar. I don't know what method he used to deceive us all. The heart-devouring cicada was not taken out and is still in my heart. It's also because of this that I want to ease the relationship. In that instant, everyone looked at Nangong Yu in a daze. They thought that after the city lord's poison was removed under his leadership, Nangong City would rise step by step and return to its former glory. But that was fake. Everyone looked on in disbelief. How was this possible? Xiaoyang smiled but didn't say anything. This hook was a little too straight. Zhao Yunfu suddenly raised his head and looked at Nangong Yu. His brows were tightly knitted and his eyes were filled with shock. As expected, the heart-devouring cicada was not so easily taken out. Chapter 30:10. Although the hook was very straight, no one knew if the fish would take the bait and whether they could fish it out. However, Nangong Yu was very confident. She understood Zhao Yunbu very well. This person was eager for quick success. Once he found an opportunity, he would definitely not be lenient. Sometimes, when he purposely left an opening for him, he would naturally take it. Although Nangong Yu did not know how deep Zhao Yunbu was hiding, his personality was sometimes enough to make a person lose his rationality and do things that were beyond the imagination of others. At this moment, Zhao Yunbu's eyes were filled with astonishment. He sized up Nangong Yu and realized that this city lord's aura was indeed a little chaotic. However, she was just forcefully suppressing it. At the same time, Zhao Yunbu's mouth moved slightly. Instantly, Nangong Yu clutched her chest and looked as though she was in great pain. In the blink of an eye, her face turned pale. From this, Zhao Yunbu was even more certain that the heart-devouring parasite had not been removed. If that was the case, then wouldn't this matter be more complicated? At a glance, who would be able to compete with him? That Sun Yi? Although he was also a 7th-level cultivator, he was never someone who was willing to cause trouble. If there were any changes, he would probably betray them at the first moment. As for those two outsiders, one of them was a 5th level, and the other was a 4th level. What could they do? I don't know why this heart-devouring parasite suddenly erupted. I have also suffered greatly from it. In the future, I will have to trouble Brother Zhao to take care of Nangong Chen. Nangong Yu sighed. She looked like a hero who was past her prime and was making arrangements for her funeral. This time, the heart-devouring parasite was really in Nan Gongyu's chest. Previously, Nan Gongyu and Xiaoyang had discussed to first put the heart-devouring parasite back. This way, they would try their best to restore their plan. At that time, they might be anxious to take action. Later on, the two of them had secretly discussed it a few times. However, they did not come up with a clear plan. However, he had already made preparations in secret. The number of people who knew about this could be counted on one's fingers. Because Xing Tian had entered the Cloud Valley, he did not know what the situation was like in this place, nor did he know to what extent this matter had developed. Nan Gongxiao and Nan Gongyong were even more anxious. With the city lord's current condition, she probably did not have many days left to live. However, the heart-devouring parasite was something that even their bright curse world's genius doctor could not solve. An outsider would naturally resort to any means to obtain the entry token. That Xiaoyang is such a despicable person. He actually dared to fool our Nangong city. Nan Gongxiao grumbled angrily. Originally, they thought that with the city lord's recovery, they would usher in a brand new beginning. Who knew that it was just an empty joy? Sometimes despair wasn't scary, but hope was false and made people happy for nothing. This kind of psychological gap was also the most difficult thing to accept. Nan Gongyu helplessly shook her head and said, "I really regret it." In the past, Nan Gongyu was also worried that if he were to leave Nangong City in his current state, then perhaps the people of Westgate City would make a move on him. Therefore, after the secret realm of daylight had opened, he had not moved for a long time. Zhao Yunfan's eyebrows twitched, and he said in a deep voice, "City Lord, how is that possible? Back then, when I practiced with you, it was indeed restored." This was also one of Zhao Yunfu's doubts. Although he was now sure that the heart-devouring goo insect still existed, he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He just felt that something wasn't right. Xiaoyang, that despicable person, used the method of drinking poison to quench his thirst. It's all my fault for wanting to get rid of the heart-devouring goo insect. But who knew that in the end, I was drugged by him and fell for his trick. I even sent them into the secret realm. As Nan Gongyu said this, she sighed again and again, with a hateful look on her face. The current situation was very clear, and that was Nan Gongyu's look of suffering. In this way, it was understandable. Sometimes, when a person was impatient, it was inevitable that they would go crazy and even neglect many things. Zhao Yunfan still didn't make a move. Instead, he looked for an opportunity to activate the heart-devouring goo insect from time to time. For a moment, Nan Gongyu was in unbearable pain, as if she could collapse at any time. Seeing this, head consecrated son, he frowned even more. He didn't look at the city lord, but looked at Chun Mingho from time to time, who was an old friend of the city lord. When he thought of this matter, although it was logical, he felt that it was a little strange and not right. Son, he also wouldn't say anything. After all, he wouldn't say anything if he didn't have something to use against him. Moreover, Sun E was even more clear about the point of protecting oneself. It was better to keep a low profile. It was easy to get into trouble if one stood out. Xiao Man was a little resentful. This guy slandered the young master like this. It was simply hateful. If she didn't know the ins and outs of the matter, Xiao Man definitely wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Xiao Yong looked unhappily. He could feel that the fish had taken the bait. This Xiao Yunfan activated the heart-devouring goo insect like this, obviously to pave the way for what would happen later. Otherwise, he would only need to test it once to know whether it was true or false. If he was really worried, it wouldn't hurt to do it again. But now it didn't stop. From this, it could be seen that this guy wanted to make a move. However, the time wasn't ripe yet. Therefore, he could only continue to endure and didn't dare to act rashly. Now, the pain that the heart-devouring goo insect brought to Zhao Yunfan was real and couldn't be faked. Although the remnant divine sense in the heart-devouring goo insect had been erased by him, He left a new strand of divine sense that wasn't much different from before. Therefore, as long as he activated the spell, he could exert force. After a while, Nan Gongyu was in so much pain that she couldn't sit. She kept rolling on the ground, sweating profusely. Nan Gongyong and Nan Gong Shao were anxious. Now they didn't know what to do. Now that the heart-devouring goo insect was acting up so violently, there was no way at all. Zhao Yunfan only looked on coldly and didn't say anything more. Sun Yi, who was at the side, felt that something was very wrong. Logically speaking, Zhao Yunfan should go over and help the city lord, but now he was turning a blind eye. There was a big problem with this wine. Therefore, Sun Yi also had to consider his own way out. The situation now was very unclear. No one knew what would happen, but living was more important than anything. Brother Zhao, I'm in too much pain. Why don't you kill me? Nan Gongyu cried out in pain. At this moment, Nan Gongyu's whole body was twitching because of the pain. Seeing the city lord in such a miserable state, everyone couldn't bear it. Even the people of the Zhong family blamed themselves. They were useless and couldn't share the burden. Okay, Zhao Yunfan replied and slowly got up. Chapter 30:11. As soon as these words came out, Nangong Shao and Nangong Yong were shocked. They looked at Elder Zhao in disbelief. What was going on? The city lord was inevitably a little confused because of the pain, so what he said now could not be taken seriously at all. Everyone should be trying to persuade him. But why did he agree so easily? Did Elder Zhao not want to see the city lord continue to suffer, so he had to do this? For a moment, Nangong Shao, Nangong Yong, and the others were stunned. They found it hard to accept for a moment. What was going on? Their minds were completely blank. Zhao Yunduo and the city lord were friends who had gone through life and death together. So, how could Elder Zhao do something that was not beneficial to the city lord? Sun Yi could see clearly that Zhao Yunbu's face was cold. He did not look like he was joking. He could even feel some killing intent. Zhao Yunbu really wanted to kill the city lord. Sun Yi frowned. He had always felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Now he seemed to have seen some clues. It seemed that everyone was in this situation. Once they made the wrong choice, the final result would be death. Even if they could leave here alive, they would probably face a situation where everyone in the bright curse realm would want to beat them up. In that case, it was not worth it. So where did the problem lie? This point was even more difficult to figure out. Immediately, Sun Yi looked sideways and found that the city lord's old friend was sitting there. He still looked indifferent, as if whatever happened here had nothing to do with them. The other party could be so calm. Sun Yi, who was the calmest, had already seen through today's matter. This was a trap used to test Zhao Yunbu's strength. Suddenly, Sun Yi thought of another possibility. Since that person had the ability to take out the heart-biting insect, he could certainly put it back. Some answers were already on the verge of coming out in Sun Yi's heart, but he had not said it yet. So he did not dare to say it directly. Once some words were said in advance, the head that was exposed would shrink back. This time, the layout would really fall short of success. Thinking of this, Sun Yi lowered his head and watched their performance. Nangong Shao and Nangong Yong saw that Zhao Yunbu was approaching the city lord step by step. They did not dare to hesitate and immediately rushed up to stop him. Elder Zhao, we know that it's very painful for you to make this decision. However, as long as the city lord was still alive, there was still hope for him to be saved. Now was not the time to be impulsive. No matter how painful it is in our hearts, we still have to endure it. Nangong Shao advised earnestly. In the past few decades, Elder Zhao's contributions were obvious to all, and the friendship between him and the city lord could not be faked. Thus, even now, the two youngsters felt that Zhao Yunbo was merely unable to bear to see the city lord continue to suffer, and had no choice but to do this. A slight smile appeared on Xiao Yang's face. It seems like Zhao Yuntua's character in Nangong City was not bad. Or else, they would still be clueless about the situation. From this, it could be seen that many things were not as simple as they seemed. Suddenly, Xiaoyang also felt a gaze directed at him. He turned around and saw Sun Yi's evasive gaze. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded, as if he had already seen through everything. Chief Sun, who was good at concealing himself, was indeed not involved in the situation, which was why he could see some clues. However, he was still unsure of which side Sun Yi was on. However, this was not a big deal. When the time was right, no matter what his identity was, it would be exposed. Seeing this, the other elders and consecrators also went up to pull Zhao Yunbo and advised, "Elder Zhao, this is just the city lord's foolish words. Don't take it seriously." Now they all felt that Zhao Yunbo was in great pain, and that he had no choice but to make such a decision. Although the chances of the city lord recovering were very small, they could not kill that little bit of hope in their hands. Sometimes, although hope seemed illusory, as long as it existed, it was enough. Get lost! Zhao Yunbo suddenly roared. Immediately, Nangong Shao, Nangong Yong, and the group of people who were pulling him were all sent flying, especially those who were of lower cultivation and whose strength was not stable enough. They were directly shaken to the point that their qi and blood were in turmoil, causing them to feel extremely uncomfortable. After Nangong Shao fell to the ground, he could clearly feel the murderous aura. "Brother Zhao, are you really planning to kill me?" Nangong Yu's tone suddenly became a lot deeper. However, because he was clearly in a weak state, his words were also weak. At this moment, Nangong Yu's heart was in great pain. Although he did not believe that Zhao Yunbo was a spy for Nangong City, he had to test any clues. However, the result of this test was sadness. He had found a dangerous factor for Nangong City, but he, Nangong Yu, would lose an old friend. Was this deal a profit or a loss? Zhao Yunbo coldly laughed and said, "Since you're in such pain, I'll grant you your wish and you'll be free." Nangong Yu helplessly shook his head. Although he did not believe it, the truth was right in front of him. What else could he do? In fact, Nangong Yu hoped that he was overthinking, or that Zhao Yunbo would change after so many years of friendship. Then, Zhao Yunbo would still be the #1 elder of Nangong City, and they would still be close friends. However, from the looks of it, that ray of hope had completely disappeared and had nothing to do with him anymore. Nangong Yu's heart was in great pain, but there was nothing he could do. Everyone had their own ambitions. Nangong Shao fiercely rushed in front of the city lord, looking as if he would kill him if he wanted to. "Even so, I still have a question in my heart. You had the chance to kill me 10 years ago. Why did you save me?" Nangong Yu asked. As soon as the words came out, everyone present was stunned. What did the city lord mean by that? Sun Yi also sat there without moving, quietly observing the situation. The elders also came to their senses. At the same time, they realized that the development of this matter had indeed exceeded their expectations and was heading towards an even worse situation. The current situation had become very delicate. Although no one knew what had happened, it was true that Zhao Yunbo wanted to kill the city lord. At that time, it seemed like there was a chance, but once I made my move, I was afraid that I would die. You did not even use all your trump cards in that situation. How could we not be afraid? Besides, if we kill Nangong Yu, there would naturally be someone else from Nangong City who would stand out. What we want is to completely destroy the Nangong family. Zhao Yunbo laughed. Chapter 30:12. Hearing this, everyone present was stunned. Why would Zhao Yunfu suddenly change his mind? This was something that no one could understand. What exactly happened that caused such a huge change? No matter how they thought about it, it was still unbelievable. Many people could not understand why this happened. The development of this matter was indeed unfathomable. Why did this happen? It was as if this matter had exceeded their expectations. Zhao Yunfu sneered. At that time, there was indeed a chance to kill Nangong Yu, but he would also lose his life. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that there would be a chance. So how could he dare to act rashly? Now that he knew Nangong City like the back of his hand, and the time was ripe, it was naturally the best time for him to make his move. Let me ask you, I have treated you well these past few decades. Why are you doing this? Nangongyu asked angrily. It could be said that in these past few years, Nangongyu had boldly given Zhao Yunfu all her authority. As an outsider, he could even lead the local cultivators. How much authority did this give him? Below 1, above 10,000 people. Zhao Yunfu sneered and said, "No matter what, I'm only an outsider. I'll always be below you, Nangongyu. In the ancestral family, if anyone is unhappy, they can give me a hard time. Why should I? I'm a 7th-tier cultivator." Hearing this, many people immediately reacted. Zhao Yunfu wanted to usurp the throne and replace the Nangong family's position. Xiao Yang glanced at his surroundings and did not sense anyone approaching. Thus, he was certain that the people from Shimin City had not arrived yet. If that was the case, this matter would be much easier to handle. Even if you kill me, will you be able to obtain Nangong City? Let me ask you, how many people here will listen to you? Nangongyu asked coldly. Zhao Yunfu coldly glanced at the people present. Nangongyu was tortured by the heart-devouring insect and had lost all her battle strength. As for Sunny, he was just a person who changed sides with the wind. As long as he was persuaded, he would naturally submit. For such a person, following anyone was the same as following. In Zhao Yunfu's eyes, Sunny did not have any position. He only wanted to find a backer. The other elders were also thinking about who they should follow next. Nangongyu said coldly, "Even if all of us are sacrificed here, you, Zhao Yunfu, will not be able to occupy Nangong City. Our bright curse sector is not xenophobic, but it doesn't mean that we can let you devour your masters and take over our nest." As soon as these words came out, the elders immediately felt as if they had eaten a pill of reassurance. It had to be said that Nangongyu still had some wisdom. One sentence was enough to make those who were wavering become firm. Indeed, if he killed Nangongyu here and followed Zhao Yunbu, he would definitely be ostracized by the entire bright curse world. This way, the gains would not make up for the losses. I can give you enough respect, but what can Shimin City give you? Are you willing to be a dog for them? Nangongyu coldly asked. Now, Nangongyu was completely disheartened, and Zhao Yunbu was determined to be his enemy. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to think about their old relationship. When these words came out, it could be said to be earth-shattering. Everyone found it hard to accept. They believed that Zhao Yunbu was just being hot-headed. He wanted to start a coup and replace the Nangong family because of his ambition. But who would have thought that he was actually a spy sent by Shimin City? No matter how they thought about it, it was unbelievable and hard to accept. Suddenly, Zhao Yunbu's expression changed. Then, his gaze landed on the foreign cultivator named Qinmingho. No one knew that he had colluded with Shimin City. How did Nangongyu find out? But at this point, it seemed that it was meaningless to try to figure out the truth. As long as he killed Nangongyu, the rest of the matter would naturally follow. Shimin family had promised that they would help me gain a foothold in Nangong City. Although I will still be controlled by them, my identity as the city lord is real. It's also true that I have taken root in the bright curse sector. Zhao Yunbu coldly laughed. From Zhao Yunbu's point of view, this situation was completely different. Shimin City and my Nangong City are about the same. This is a hot steamed bun. Do you think they will still give you Nangong City? Or even help you gain a foothold instead of burning the bridge after crossing the river? Or maybe they will kill you after you've outlived your usefulness and use your head to calm the anger of the people of Nangong City. This seems to be the most reliable choice. Nangongyu coldly said. No matter how one looked at it, this was just a normal operation. If Shimin City wanted to gain the allegiance of all the forces in Nangong City, they would need to do something. Completely suppressing them with brute force would bring them endless troubles. But if they were to help City Lord Nangong, and then support a puppet in the Nangong family. They would be more assured. Do you think Shimin family head has the same mindset as you? Shimin family head wants to build a force that can stand shoulder to shoulder with the two sections. Nangong City is only the beginning. For cities, from today onwards, there can only be one city. His mindset is not as simple as simply swallowing Nangong City. Zhao Yunbu coldly said. This was also the reason why Zhao Yunbu could trust Shimin City so much. They were the cornerstone, and if Shimin City wanted to go further, they naturally could not burn the bridge after crossing the river. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Yunbu glanced at the elders and said, "Follow me and nothing will change. You can even be promoted. If you insist on being stubborn, then die together with Nangongyu." Once those words were spoken, those people that were close to Zhao Yundu immediately echoed in agreement, especially some of the guests who were not courteous at all and directly chose to follow him. After all, how could they not cherish the opportunity to become a local from an outsider? But that was only a small portion, and many of them were still wavering. Under such circumstances, it was difficult to predict the outcome. Sun Yi, you better think carefully. If you are willing to help me, you will still be Chief Sunday, or else only death awaits you, Zhao Yunbu coldly said. However, Sun Yi stood up with a smile and said, "Although I, Sun, am not very capable, I am still grateful for City Lord Nangong's kindness and care over the years. Regardless of the outcome, I will still do my part. Furthermore, I, Sun Yi, am only keeping a low profile and am not a fence-sitter. I will not kill my master. You are courting death." As soon as Zhao Yunbu finished speaking, he immediately waved his hand, and a large black banner began to dance. "Then I will let you have a taste of this poisonous spirit banner." Zhao Yunbu laughed loudly and waved the banner to his heart's content. Chapter 30:13. When the poisonous spirit banner was waved, a black, demonic wind appeared. In the blink of an eye, it was everywhere. When everyone saw this, they immediately guarded their minds and held their breaths to resist the demonic wind. However, Zhao Yunbu turned a blind eye to it. He waved the banner crazily, and the demonic wind spread even further. Within a radius of 10 miles, almost everything was covered by the black fog. In an instant, Nangong Shao and Nangong Yong, who were closest to it, did not show any abnormalities. However, their brows were tightly knitted together, and their faces became extremely ugly. It was as if they could collapse at any time. However, in the next moment, the two of them collapsed to the ground as if they had no strength left. Nangong Yang's personality was more stubborn. He tried to stand up several times, but he fell to the ground every time. As he resisted more and more, the speed of the poison's invasion became faster and faster. Soon he was lying on the ground like soft mud, unable to move. The other elders directly sat on the ground, not daring to move. They could only guard their minds. The invasion of the poison made it very difficult for them to resist it. They could not block it at all. It was true that a powerhouse like Sun Yi, although he was still standing there, he did not have the same imposing manner as before. The poisonous spirit banner was too fast. Although they had already started to guard against it, they were still a little too late. They had already been hit. Sun Yi gritted his teeth as if he wanted to force the poison out of his body. However, the effect was minimal. If he used more force, he could force out more than half of the poison, but he would also be severely injured due to the collision of his blood and qi. Xiaoman also sat on the ground, paralyzed. The feeling of powerlessness made her feel even more helpless. When Xiaoyang fell, one of his hands was already on Xiaoman's wrist. Traces of poison seeped into her. He began to use the method of fighting poison with poison to detoxify the girl. The poison emitted by the poisonous spirit banner could constantly disturb a person's mind. At the same time, it would also make their limbs weak or even numb, making it difficult for them to resist. Don't lose your mind. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome. Xiaoyang used a method to send a message to Xiaoman telling her not to act rashly. Xiao Man blinked her eyes. She understood, so she did not move. Xiao Yang wanted to see what other tricks this guy had up his sleeves. It had to be said that Westgate City really valued Zhao Yunfu, to the point that they even gave him such a powerful magic tool. It could be seen how important his role was in taking down Nangong City. If Xiao Yang was not here, it was likely that most of the people in Nangong City would have died under the poisonous spirit banner. First, Nangong Yu was tortured by the heart-devouring cicada. Now, she was struck by the poisoned spirit banner. She fell to the ground, feeling even worse. So the heart-devouring cicada was also planted in my body by you. Nangong Yu asked with a bitter smile. Right now, it was already not easy for Nangong Yu to be able to protect her mind. In addition, she still had to deal with the consequences that would follow. It could be said that she was suffering unspeakably. His voice was also very weak. It was obvious that he was extremely weak. That's right. Initially, I wanted to use the heart-devouring cicada to slowly torture you to death, to wear down the patience of the people of Nangong City. I did not expect you to be so strong. You even managed to find a doctor from the bright curse world to be able to hold on for so long. Zhao Yunfu said coldly. The original plan was for Zhao Yunfu to continuously take over Nangong Yu's authority. However, who knew that this guy still trusted the Zhong family more. In addition, his only son was also very outstanding and controlled most of the people's hearts. As such, the plan had to be changed. But now, all these were no longer important. As long as Nangong Yu was killed on the spot, no matter what son he chose, he would not be able to continue working for Nangong City. In this way, only Nangong, Wen Xian, and some of the old bones of the Zhong family would be in trouble. When the people from Westgate City arrived, they would be able to quickly eliminate them. This was not a problem at all. If he, Zhao Yunfu, was the first to kill Nangong Yu, and if he did it alone, then his contribution would be the greatest. In this way, he could negotiate with Westgate City. Who knows, he might even be able to obtain more rewards. Thinking of this, Zhao Yunfu felt a little excited. It was as if glory and wealth would fall into his hands in the blink of an eye. Do you really think you can win against me? Nangong Yu snorted and said. In the next moment, an aura exploded from Nangong Yu's body. Instantly, the poison was forced out by her. However, just as Nangong Yu stood up, she fell to the ground. The torture from the heart-devouring cicada previously, in addition to forcefully dispersing the poison, had caused her injuries to become even more serious. If she still wanted to fight with him, it was no different from seeking death. Sun Yi suddenly snorted and forcefully suppressed the poison. He launched an attack from behind, wanting to launch a sneak attack. However, who knew that Zhao Yunfu would wave the poisonous spirit banner in his hand, directly dispersing Sun Yi's attack and sending him flying. The poisonous spirit banner had caught everyone off guard, and they did not know how to deal with it. Moreover, those elders who did not want to get involved could only guard their minds. It would not be too late to make a decision after this farce was over. Anyway, they had an excuse now. Because of the poison, they could not even protect themselves, so they could not help. After Sun Yi fell, he once again stood up shakily. His eyes were filled with stubbornness, as if he was prepared to fight to the death. However, his 4 limbs were constantly trembling. It seemed impossible for him to fight again. Nangong Xiao also had a violent temper. He roared and stood up. The rest of the Zhong family members were also forcefully suppressing the poison. However, the effect was very poor. With their cultivation level and strength, it was already very difficult for them to suppress it. It was not that they were not capable enough. It was just that they were caught off guard and did not have the time to think about how to deal with it. Sun Yi, I will give you one more choice. If you are wrong, you will die. The current you is simply unable to compete with me. Zhao Yunfu sneered. Although Sun Yi was a very low-profile person, Zhao Yunfu also valued this point. He stood aloof from worldly affairs. Only when he could use Sun E could he be at ease. Moreover, although Sun E had not displayed the strength of a 7th-stage cultivator, he was still a 7th-stage cultivator and could not be ignored. Fellow Xiao, you have seen enough of this good show. Since the fish has taken the bait, you should help me reel in the net. Nan Gongyu suddenly smiled and said. When these words came out, Zhao Yunfu was stunned. Where was that fellow Xiao? However, in the surroundings, he could not sense the existence of other experts. Chapter 3014. Zhao Yunbu looked around but did not see the so-called fellow Xiao that the city lord was talking about. Zhao Yunbu naturally knew that the person Nan Gongyu was talking about was Xiaoyang. But wasn't he a liar? Many people felt that the city lord must have lost his mind, which was why he said such nonsense. It would be difficult for them to survive now. Or perhaps he was just deliberately mystifying and wanted to use such methods to scare Zhao Yunbu away. However, was this matter really that simple? Hence, from their point of view, everything seemed to be unrealistic. Suddenly, Zhao Yunbu's gaze landed on Qin Mingho. This pair of senior brother and junior sister, in addition to another senior brother, had entered the Cloud Valley. Could this be a coincidence? I didn't think that you would change your face and stay here. Zhao Yunbu glared at him and said coldly. At this moment, Zhao Yunbu also realized that this was a trap that was purposely set up against him. So what if he was exposed this time? They had miscalculated one thing. He had a weapon like the poisonous spirit banner in his hands, and that was enough to determine the outcome. Xiao Yang slowly stood up and said, This guy is after all a member of your Nangong city. If you don't speak, it will be difficult for me. If one did not speak of cleaning up the sect, it would be troublesome if one did. Seeing this, Nan Gongyu instantly heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, when he said those words earlier, he was mostly probing. He thought that since Xiaoyang was able to cure him of the heart-devouring cicada's poison and accurately put it back, it could be seen how profound this person's attainments in the field of poison were. Hence, as long as he could cure the poison in the poisonous spirit banner, the situation would instantly be reversed. Seeing this, Sun E smiled carelessly. He had already suspected it before, but he did not say it out loud. As expected, it was not too different from what he had guessed. This young man was indeed not a simple character. Regardless of whether it was scheming or scheming, he was first class. Quickly cure me and Chief Sun E. The two of us can take him down together. Nan Gongyu took a deep breath and said in a low voice. Zhao Yunbu smiled and said, You're actually not poisoned. This made Zhao Yunfu very surprised. This person was indeed not simple, and he even dared to set a trap for him. Xiao Yang nodded and said, Your poisonous spirit banner is indeed interesting, but in my opinion it's just some unorthodox Dao. Although he didn't directly answer the question, Zhao Yunfu could tell that this was indeed the case. Since the other party was able to stand there unscathed, it meant that he had not been hit. This fellow was truly an anomaly. Mayor Nangong, you can't be thinking that you can turn the tables with just this brat, right? If the poison of this poisonous spirit banner was so easy to detoxify, I'm afraid that he would have already made his move. Zhao Yunfu glanced at him and said, Nangong, you couldn't help but frown. Xiao Yang indeed had the means to cure the poison, but would Zhao Yunbu give him the chance to do so? Zhao Yunduo was no fool. Naturally, he would not allow Xiaoyang to do so. Right now, Zhao Yun was probably itching to kill all of them here. At the thought of this, Nan Gongyu's heart became increasingly uncomfortable. Looks like she had miscalculated. Fellow Xiao, if you are unable to turn the tide, please immediately enter the Cloud Valley and bring my son, Wenqin, back to Nangong City. Nan Gongyu said in despair. Since they had gone too far this time, their deaths were already a foregone conclusion. There was no other way. However, Nan Gongyu could not bear to see her only son die here. As long as he was alive, Nangong City would rise again one day. If Nangong Wenqin were to die here, Nangong City which had no future, would naturally be destroyed. Escape? Did you ask for my permission? Zhao Yunfu sneered. Zhao Yunfu understood the principle of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. If the people present today did not submit to him, then there would only be one final outcome: death. On this point, Zhao Yunfu was also very clear. If anyone were to leave alive and say anything else, he would not be able to live peacefully in Nangong City. If this matter was blown out of proportion and alarmed some powerful beings, things would become even more complicated. Therefore, he could not afford to leave any future troubles behind. He had to clean up his emotions. Originally, I was prepared to leave with a flick of my sleeves and not ask about this place. In the end, since you've said so, I really want to see just how strong a 7th-stage powerhouse like you is. Xiao Yang shook his robe and said with an unconcerned smile. This Zhao Yunfu had caused trouble for Xiao Yang previously. Xiao Yang did not want to be calculative with him. Now that he had met him, it was only natural for him to compete and see who was stronger. Sure, come on then, Zhao Yunfu said with a cold smile. This guy was only a 6th-stage martial emperor. So what if he was a monster? The difference in cultivation level was an insurmountable gap for the opponent. You may have an extraordinary understanding of poison, but in terms of battle, you are just a fledgling. Or else, why would the other party tolerate my provocation in Nangong City? Strength is the right to be arrogant. If you don't have it, you should just lie there obediently. Looking at Zhao Yunfu's arrogant face, Xiao Yang felt a little uncomfortable. Did these people really think that he was unparalleled in the world? If that's the case, then I will reluctantly send you to reunite with Zhang Xuanji, Xiao Yang said, and his voice became much colder. With a clang, a divine sword was unsheathed. Xiao Yang held it tightly in his hand, full of battle intent. At that moment, Zhao Yunfu's eyes were filled with rage. He never thought that his old friend would die. Moreover, he died in their hands. The other party also had a 7th-stage cultivator. Therefore, it was not strange that they could kill Zhang Xuanji. Therefore, it made sense why the other party knew that he was in cahoots with Ximen City. Zhao Yunfu calmed himself down. After confirming that the 7th-stage cultivator was not nearby, he relaxed. They must have paid a heavy price to kill Zhang Xuanji. Therefore, the other person who escaped into the Cloud Valley must have left this place to recuperate. You are indeed a variable. However, the outcome cannot be changed, Zhao Yunfu said with a cold smile. In the next moment, Zhao Yunfu stuck the poisonous spirit banner into the ground. His entire body emitted an extremely strong battle intent and killing intent. Since the poisonous spirit banner was useless against the young man, then he would use his purest strength to fight him. This was enough to crush him and kill him. Chapter 30:15. Xiao Yang merely smiled nonchalantly. Soon after, countless sword lights appeared around him. With a low shout, he relied on the sharpness of his sword aura and charged towards Zhao Yunfu. Now, if he wanted to cure Nangongyu, Sun Yi and the rest, it would indeed take some effort. When the time comes, Zhao Yunfu would definitely interfere. Since that was the case, he might as well get rid of Zhao Yunfu first. Then, the following matters would naturally be much easier to handle. Now was the time to fulfill the promise. After this battle, whatever fate Nan Gongcheng would face would naturally not have much to do with Xiao Yang. Seeing that the young brat actually daring to charge at him with his sword, Zhao Yunfu snorted coldly, completely unconcerned. He casually threw out a punch. Instantly, the entire tent exploded under the crisscrossing of his fist aura and sword aura, turning into countless fragments that drifted through the air until they turned into fine powder. Boom! The two's power exploded upon impact. Instantly, countless fist auras swept out and sword auras swept out. Even the poison spirit banner was shaken until it fluttered loudly. As a result, even more poison was released and was rapidly sweeping out in all directions. The scene was extremely impressive. Xiaoyang was forced to take a few steps back. He could not help but admit that Zhao Yunfu was indeed quite powerful. After all, he was a veteran 7th level cultivator. How could he possibly be a simple person? However, Nan Gongyu was currently extremely worried. Although she knew that Xiaoyang was powerful, the gap between their cultivation levels was still difficult to overcome. If she were to fight Zhao Yunfu alone, her chances of victory would be extremely slim. It could even be said that it was completely impossible. As such, Nan Gongyu was even more worried. Could it be that Nan Gongyu, was really going to die here? However, they were not without hope. Yungu was right below them. If the Nangong family could return in time, it was not impossible for them to fight. Or perhaps if the 7th level cultivator by Xiaoyang's side, Xingtian, could appear in time, then this battle could still be settled. However, these were all uncertain factors. If they wanted to wait for their reinforcements, that would be even more difficult. It could even be said that it was impossible. Nangong Xiao looked at the sword-wielding young man and suddenly felt a little ashamed. Back then, he had thought that the other party was just a busybody. Unexpectedly, he was the savior of the Nangong family. Zhao Yun was forced to take a few steps back. At the same time, a sinister light flashed through his eyes. You do have some strength, but you're only at the 6th step at most. If that's the case, how can you contend against me? Zhao Yunfu sneered. In the next moment, Zhao Yunfu formed a hand seal and took the initiative to attack. In an instant, his aura reached its peak. From Zhao Yunfu's point of view, this battle naturally had to be ended quickly. It was not yet the agreed time, and the main forces of Westgate City had not arrived yet. Thus, he could not drag this out any longer. At that time, if 1 or 2 old fellows walked out from the Cloud Valley, even though he had the poison spirit banner and could still guarantee his victory, it would not be easy for him to obtain victory. The more variables there were, the more uncertainties there would be, the more mistakes there would be in his sure win. When Xiaoyang saw the other party charging at him, he swung the divine sword in his hand once again. Countless streams of sword qi surged out. Plunder like fire. In the next moment, Xiaoyang swung out countless streams of sword qi, as if he was prepared to fight to the death with the other party. When everyone saw how brave Xiaoyang was, they were all shocked. They had heard of him before, but they did not expect him to be so powerful. It was shocking. On the other hand, Lil Man quietly stood up and observed the battle between the two. Xiao Man was also very clear that every battle of the young master was extremely important to her. If she could learn something from him, it would be a great thing. The sword qi and the palm print collided with each other, and layers of aftershocks swept out continuously. Some of the weaker cultivators were unable to withstand the shock waves and were sent flying by the shock waves. They slammed into the rocks and trees and revealed looks of pain. Although those elders could barely withstand it, it was extremely difficult. Sun Yi sat on the ground, suppressing the poison while staring at the battle. He wanted to know, with Xiaoyang's strength, if he could turn the tables around and revive this hopeless situation. However, sometimes hope might not work. After all, the difference in cultivation level was right there, and it was not something that could be easily changed. After another clash, the two were both pushed back by dozens of feet. After Xiaoyang stabilized his body, he calmly glanced at the place where the others had fallen. They absolutely could not continue to choose that place as the battlefield. Otherwise, with the aftermath of their battle, it was likely that these people would suffer even more serious injuries. Furthermore, the poisonous spirit banner was able to disturb one's mind. If they were to lose themselves, it would be troublesome in the end. Uncertainties were extremely frightening to both parties. But to Xiaoyang, it was the most serious. After all, he wanted to protect Nangongcheng once, so naturally he had to fight for more lives. Zhao Yunfu frowned slightly. He did not expect this young man's strength to be so profound. In the two clashes, there was actually a feeling of being on par with each other. This made Zhao Yunde more or less feel that it was a little ridiculous. Although he found it hard to accept, since they had already come this far, what else could he do? No wonder you're so confident. So you do have some strength. Zhao Yunfu sneered. The sudden appearance of a strong enemy was indeed unexpected. However, from Zhao Yunfu's point of view, the outcome could not be changed. It could even be said that everything was already decided. No matter how powerful Xiaoyang was, it would be difficult for him to create a huge storm. Although it would be troublesome to get rid of him, it would not be a problem to take him down. Xiaoyang smiled and shook his head. It's your strength that makes me feel that it's ordinary. Zhao Yunfu smiled. Young people were like this, proud and arrogant, as if they did not put anything in their eyes. However, Nan Gongyu knew that although Zhao Yunfu's 7th level strength was not the best among those in the same cultivation level, it was still considered solid. It was not a weak cultivation level. Therefore, to challenge and defeat him, no matter how one looked at it, was obviously not an easy task. No matter how strong Xiaoyang was, the gap between their cultivation levels was difficult to overcome. Nan Gongyu gritted her teeth and shouted, "Brother Xiao, just take your sister and leave. Avenge us in the future. If you die here, Nan Gongchang will be finished." From Nan Gongyu's point of view, protecting Nan Gongchang's foundation was more important than anything else, even her own life. Chapter 30:16. When everyone heard Nan Gongyu's words, they could not help but fall into despair. The truth seemed to be as such. With Xiaoyang's strength, it was indeed very difficult for him to defeat Zhao Yunfu. It could even be said to be an impossible task. If everyone were to lose their lives here, some things would be covered up and they would never be able to clear their names. Therefore, it would be best if there was someone who could spread the news. Furthermore, there were a few powerhouses from the Nangong clan in the Cloud Valley. Even if Zhao Yunfu had the poisonous spirit banner, he would not dare to enter. Although the Cloud Valley was not big, it was the birthplace of the Nangong clan. Many elders liked to stay in there and meditate in order to find an opportunity to break through. Zhao Yunfu glared at Nan Gongyu. He could not wait to kill this talkative person right now. That way, there would be no one to guide Xiaoyang, and it would be much less troublesome. However, Xiaoyang did not mind as he smiled and said, "It's just a small Zhao Yunfu. I don't think much of him." When these words were spoken, it could be said that they would be shocked to death. However, they didn't know that what Xiaoyang said was the truth. Although he and Zhao Yunfu had only just fought, it was enough to tell how strong Zhao Yunfu was from these aspects. Therefore, he only needed to use a few tricks to defeat him. All these years, Zhao Yunfu probably did not put in any effort to obtain Nangong City. Therefore, it was inevitable that he would slack off in his cultivation. The so-called solid in their eyes, however, was nothing more than ordinary in Xiaoyang's eyes. "Good kid, I admire you for that. If you really have the ability, come and kill me now," Zhao Yunfu said as he laughed out loud. It could be said that what Zhao Yunfu was most worried about was that Xiaoyang would escape. If he really entered the Cloud Valley, the situation would probably develop into the worst possible situation. At that time, there would be a lot of variables. However, as long as the other party dared to fight him head-on, all these problems would naturally dissipate quickly. Looks like you've been completely misled by the concept of cultivation level. Having a high cultivation level doesn't necessarily mean that you're strong enough, Xiaoyang said with a laugh. In the next moment, Xiaoyang swung the divine sword in his hand, and a gust of sword qi appeared again. A mere Zhao Yunbu had been away from the battlefield for a long time. Who knew where he got his confidence from, thinking that he would definitely win? Of course, this was human nature. At their level, the gap between every single realm was like a natural chasm that was difficult to surmount. To be able to challenge someone of a higher level, one must be a prodigy. There were even fewer people in the bright curse realm who could do this. At present, only 2 people among the younger generation had such a reputation. Both of them were from the bright deity sect and the cursed deity sect, respectively. Xiaoyang took a deep breath. At the same time, he had already prepared himself. Next time, he slashed out with his sword. Lightning, prison, true fire, annihilation. For a moment, wind and fire roared. Thunder and lightning. Zhao Yunbu looked at the lightning that appeared around him and attacked him like a prison. Suddenly, he couldn't help but frown. This guy's strength was indeed very strong. Every bolt of lightning contained an extremely powerful force. Once hit, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. At this moment, Xiao Yang's prestige had yet to reach its peak, but his entire aura had already changed. Compared to before, it was unknown how much stronger he was. It was fine if he didn't move, but once he moved, he used his full strength. Now that Xiao Yang had some understanding of Zhao Yunbu's strength, there was no need for him to test it out. He only needed to use his full strength and directly kill him. When everyone saw Xiao Yang erupt with such tyrannical power in an instant, they suddenly had some hope. Perhaps this young man wasn't being arrogant, but he really did have that kind of valiant strength. If he could kill Zhao Yunbu now, then the situation would usher in a very big change. At that time, it wasn't impossible for them to fight against Westgate City. At the very least, they wouldn't be defeated. It would be an evenly matched battle, and they wouldn't die too grievously. Nangong Yong and Nangong Zhao's eyes also lit up with hope. They felt that Xiao Yang was the savior of the Nangong clan, and there was still a chance for everything to be salvaged. Even Nangong Yu's eyes were filled with shock. Suddenly, she understood why Xingtian would follow Xiao Yang. It turned out that this person was not only proficient in the art of pill poison, but also in battle. At this moment, Nangong Yu even felt that this person might be able to compete with the two monsters from the two sects. At this moment, Zhao Yunbu also felt extremely pressured. He could also feel that terrifying aura, and the killing intent of the other party was also very terrifying. Good boy. Zhao Yunbu gritted his teeth. Since you're so tyrannical, then I'll try it today and see how to kill a genius. Zhao Yunbu was only a little surprised, but he still believed that the gap between their realms was still insurmountable. If the person he was facing was someone like Ming Jun, he naturally wouldn't be able to compete with him. However, how could an unknown person who suddenly appeared be so terrifying? Moreover, if there really was someone who was comparable to Ming Jun, how could he not join the two sects? In the next moment, Zhao Yunbu's hand seals were constantly twisting, and waves of aura were constantly erupting. His robes fluttered without wind. A sense of righteousness arose spontaneously, as if he was invincible. Even the ground he was standing on had become slightly distorted under this aura. The great enemy they were standing on was originally formed by pure spiritual energy. Now it was somewhat difficult for it to hold on, which was why there was such a strange phenomenon. Xiao Yang didn't care about it, and his sword moved forward. Countless lightning bolts were constantly closing in, as if they wanted to kill him directly. This was a killer move, but whether or not it could kill wall paint directly was another question. Brother Xiao, be careful. This is the long slaughter seal, and its power is astonishing. Don't face it head-on. Seeing this, Nangong Yu immediately warned. Although Nangong Yu didn't know how strong Xiao Yang was, it wouldn't be wrong to give an appropriate warning. If Xiao Yang knew what was going on, then it wouldn't be too troublesome to deal with it. It could even be said that it would be much simpler. Although Nangong Yu couldn't contribute to the battle now, she still understood Zhao Yunbu. Therefore, there would be no problems at all if she could give him some pointers. As the saying goes, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Chapter 3017. Zhao Yunfu only glared at Nangong Yu coldly and snorted. He felt that her words were completely unnecessary. Even if you explained your martial skill clearly, would you be able to block it? That was a complete joke. It was impossible. Furthermore, that brat looked as if he wanted to fight it out and did not look like he was going to dodge it. Furthermore, if the other party really dared to dodge, he would not mind using the long slaughter seal on Nangong Yu and the others. After all, someone would have to pay the price with their life. As for who would die, Zhao Yunfu did not care. As long as it was not him, everything was fine. Xiao Yang still looked as if he did not hear anything. When the other party's aura erupted, he already had an idea in his heart and was even somewhat on guard. However, he had already slashed out with his sword. Naturally, there was no reason for him to dodge. If he wanted to fight, then he naturally could not be weak in determination. If his aura was weak, it would only make the other party feel that he was weak and could be bullied. If that was the case, how could he live up to the words young and vigorous? Xiao Man stood in the distance and looked as if she did not care. She knew that since the young master dared to face the difficulty, it meant that he had the ability to deal with it. That was why he was so fearless. Seeing that Xiao Man was fine, Sun Yi asked tentatively, "Fellow Taoist, can you help me detoxify the poison so that I can help fellow Taoist Xiao?" Now, Sun Yi had a higher opinion of this pair of master and servant. They were indeed not simple. It seemed that no matter what kind of situation they were in, they could handle it calmly. Xiao Man shook her head and said, "My poison was detoxified by the young master. I don't have that kind of ability." Hearing this, Sun Yi could only laugh bitterly. Since that was the case, there was really nothing he could do. However, looking at the situation, even if he did not make a move, it would not be a problem. With Xiao Yang's current aura, the chances of him winning were still relatively high. Of course, the premise was that he would not make any mistakes or do anything rash. Sun Yi looked at the poisonous spirit banner and frowned slightly. If he could put it away, without the interference of his consciousness, he could forcefully endure the poison and go out to help. However, the only one who could move and didn't seem to be affected was Xiao Man. However, this little girl was only a third-order martial emperor. With her strength, it seemed impossible for her to get close to the poisonous spirit banner. Sun Yi could only shake his head. From the looks of it, things were not going to go well. However, given the current situation, there was no need for him to be in a hurry to make a move. He might as well observe for a while longer. If Xiao Yang fell into a disadvantageous position, then even if Sun Yi's poison would completely erupt, he would still forcefully attack. Otherwise, even if he died, there was still a chance and hope for him to recover from the poison. However, if he lost his life because of it, then everything would be over. It would be meaningless. Zhao Yunbua's hand seal suddenly froze. At the same time, a huge imprint appeared above his head. It was constantly expanding. As the thunderbolts closed in, they bombarded the surface in a frenzy. Wave after wave of aftershocks spread out continuously. However, the seal was as stable as Mount Tai. There was no sign of it moving at all. It was like a hard bone that couldn't be chewed. In the blink of an eye, under the suppression of the seal, the surrounding thunderbolts quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never appeared. Seeing that the thunderbolts were easily wiped out, Zhao Yunbua sneered disdainfully. This was the difference in their cultivation realms. Their strength was even more incomparable. "Go to hell!" Zhao Yunbua shouted angrily. With a wave of his hand, the long slaughter seal flew out and collided with Xiao Yang, who was charging toward him. In Xiao Yang's eyes, the long slaughter seal was no longer a simple seal at this moment. What he saw was countless sharp weapons flying toward him. It seemed that every single one of them had a high chance of cutting off his head. This was the ingenuity of the long slaughter seal. It combined thousands of killing intent and condensed into an indestructible seal. Once it exploded, the killing intent within it would no longer be restrained. It was extremely terrifying. Xiao Yang snorted coldly. He did not show any fear. Instead, his aura became even stronger. "In that case, I'll show you what true strength is. Even if you're a 7th level powerhouse, I'll still fight you to see who's stronger." Boom! In an instant, the long slaughter seal shattered with a bang. It was as if it had been crushed by mud, unable to withstand a single blow. Zhao Yunbo was still smiling. This guy is eager to die. In the next moment, the long slaughter seal suddenly turned into countless weapons. Like a swarm of locusts, they shot toward Xiaoyang in a frenzy. Countless flaming sword qis were shattered by the ferocious attacks. Some of the sword qis had even pierced into Xiaoyang's body. However, the young man did not seem to feel anything. He was still attacking with all his might. It was as if he would not stop until the sword in his hand could not penetrate his opponent's body. As for the price he would have to pay, he did not pay much attention to it. It could even be said that he turned a blind eye to it. He's going all out. Everyone was even more shocked. They could now understand why Xiaoyang was so confident. This kind of desperate fighting style would probably make everyone wary. Cultivators who did not care about their lives were the most difficult to deal with. They only had one goal. As for the price they would have to pay, they did not care at all. It was simply a nightmare to be an opponent of such a person. Zhao Yunbu's eyes were also filled with shock. Normally, this cultivator would even seem weak, but in battle he was actually able to fight with his life on the line. This was truly a bit unbelievable. However, Zhao Yunbo did not feel guilty. Instead, he formed another seal. Immediately, another barrier appeared in front of him. Since you want to trade your life for his, I won't give you the chance. In the blink of an eye, the tip of the sword arrived. However, the barrier that Zhao Yunbo suddenly formed shattered in an instant. It was as if it had no effect at all. It could be said that Xiaoyang had used all of his power on this sword. It was naturally difficult to kill Zhao Yunbo using ordinary methods. Therefore, he needed to use some thought. In an instant, a trace of shock flashed through Zhao Yunbo's eyes. In the next moment, the divine sword directly pierced his body. Countless sword intent rushed in at this moment and crazily surged into his body. It was very crazy. When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but subconsciously hold their breaths. Perhaps the victor was about to be decided. This young man's strength was indeed domineering. It was indeed shocking. Chapter 3018. Boundless power poured down, and Zhao Yun could no longer resist it. Suddenly, his entire body seemed to be out of his control, and he was sent flying in an instant. Xiaoyang was also crushed by the remaining power of the long slaughter seal. With a boom, he was smashed into the ground. There was no dust at all. There was only black smoke lingering around, making people feel uncomfortable. Everyone was speechless. At the same time, the shock in their hearts made them lose the ability to think. In the next moment, Xiaoyang suddenly stood up and slashed out again. Myriad poison, lightning, dragon roar. A bolt of lightning turned into a lightning dragon. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it slashed at Zhao Yunfu with extreme speed. As soon as Zhao Yunfu stood up, the robe he was wearing had been completely torn to pieces. The flesh on his chest had been charred black, and his aura had also become somewhat disordered. Before he could stabilize his mind, another lightning dragon came crashing at him. With a thought, he immediately sent out a burst of power. The lightning dragon arrived in front of him and shattered in an instant. When Zhao Yunbu saw the lightning dragon shatter, a smile appeared on his face. Looks like you put all your power into that attack just now. A class 6 is a class 6. You can't overturn the heavens, Zhao Yunfu said disdainfully. He allowed some of the lightning to fall on his body, but the damage they caused was minuscule. He didn't feel any pain at all, so there was no way he would be able to hurt him. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard that. Xiaoyang's last attack was indeed worlds apart from the one before. From this, they could tell that Xiaoyang probably didn't have much power left, which was why he seemed so frivolous. Moreover, he had no choice but to immediately slash out and gamble again to see if he could kill Zhao Yunfu. However, he had still underestimated Zhao Yunfu. No matter how good his calculations were, the difference in strength was too great. He couldn't be blamed for this. Xiaoyang's method was indeed very risky, but to challenge someone of a higher level, he had to use all his power to create an opportunity. Nan Gong and Nan Gong Shao lowered their heads in dejection. They thought that hope had arrived, but in the end, all they faced was despair. It was as if everything had already been decided and could no longer be changed. Sun Yi, on the other hand, was accumulating his strength. If it really didn't work, then he would give it a try. If he went all out, he might even be able to force Zhao Yun to retreat. This way, they would still have a way to survive. If they really allowed Zhao Yun to succeed, they would probably all die here. Sun Yi was not sacrificing himself for others. His thoughts and actions were all for himself. After all, this was the general trend. If he didn't submit to Zhao Yunfu earlier, Zhao Yunfu probably wouldn't let him off easily. If that's the case, he might as well give it his all. Perhaps Nan Gongcheng would be grateful to him, and his descendants would have a smoother journey in the bright curse world. Sun Yi was very clear about these things. Fellow Daoist Xiao, you've already done your best. If there's nothing else you can do, then leave quickly. Do your best. No one will blame you. You've already kept your promise, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Nan Gongyu opened her mouth once more. It could be said that after the heart-devouring cicada was taken out, Nan Gongyu felt that this deal was a good one. As for whether the first two conditions were fulfilled, it didn't matter anymore. After all, the last condition was the most important one. Xiao Yang shook his head with a smile, then turned around and walked toward the poisonous, spirit-poisoning banner. Seeing Xiao Yang's action, Sun Yi's eyes flickered with excitement. Without the interference of that thing, he could still make his move. Both he and Zhao Yunfu were severely injured. If they were to fight with their lives on the line, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious in the end. Sometimes, hope was extremely important. Once it existed, it would cause one to be extremely excited. Today, all of you will die here. No one is allowed to leave. Zhao Yunfu burst out laughing. Xiao Yang, who was not affected by the poisonous spirit-poisoning banner, had lost his ability to fight. Now, all he needed to do was to raise his saber and kill them one by one. City Lord Zhao, I'm willing to serve you as my master. Immediately, some of the people who were hesitating began to beg for mercy, hoping to find a chance to live. Zhao Yunfu smiled and nodded his head, agreeing on the surface. After all, these people were part of Nan Gongcheng's team. Since they were willing to submit, there was no need to kill them all. As long as they were not the core members or those he could not control, he could do so. Nan Gongyong and Nan Gongshao were infuriated when they saw these people betraying them without any backbone. In the past, Nan Gongcheng had treated them well. However, they did not expect him to betray them now. The two brothers felt that this was ridiculous. They had raised a bunch of ingrates. These guests were indeed unreliable. Sun Yi, I'll give you one more chance to choose. As long as you submit, everything is negotiable. Zhao Yunfu said. Sun Yi snorted coldly and said, Bastard, do you think I have no bottom line like those beasts? Hearing those words, Zhao Yunfu immediately exploded with anger. No matter how he tried to persuade him, the situation had already reached this point, yet this old bastard still refused to budge. Since you want to die heroically, I'll fulfill your wish. Zhao Yunfu snorted coldly. From the beginning, Zhao Yunfu had thought that Sun Yi was a fence-sitter. As long as the situation was not right, Sun Yi would side with him. However, he was wrong. Hearing this, Nan Gongyu was slightly relieved. It could be said that he had always been suspicious of Sun Yi. However, in the end, among all the guests, he was the only one with some backbone. Indeed, one could only see through a person in front of a life-and-death situation. However, it was already too late. She, Nan Gongyu, was not far from her death date. Using himself as bait, he did not expect to die here. Even if Nan Gongyu was not tortured by the heart-devouring insect, she would not be able to defeat Zhao Yunfu in front of the poisonous spirit banner. Do you think you can hold the poisonous spirit banner? Zhao Yunfu sneered coldly. The poisonous spirit banner had a unique method to control it. If an ordinary person touched it, they would definitely be harmed. Therefore, Zhao Yunfu was assured to place the poisonous spirit banner there to intimidate Nan Gongyu, Sun Yi, and the rest. Xiao Yang turned around and said, "Is that so?" As soon as he finished speaking, the poisonous spirit banner was pulled out by Xiao Yang effortlessly. There was nothing strange about it. Seeing this scene, Zhao Yunfu could no longer remain calm and immediately rushed forward. He knew that once Xiao Yang took out the poisonous spirit banner, Nan Gongyu and Sun Yi would definitely counterattack with all their might. However, after a few steps, Zhao Yunfu staggered and fell to the ground. Chapter 3019. After taking out the poisonous spirit banner, Xiao Yang shook it a few times in his hand. It looked very light, as if nothing had happened. Then, Xiao Yang began to play with the poisonous spirit banner. This thing in his hand did not seem to be a terrifying evil item. It was like a toy that he could play with as he pleased. As for Zhao Yunfu, who had fallen in front of him, he did not even look at him. When everyone saw this, they were even more surprised. They really could not understand what was going on. Zhao Yunfu fell to the ground and tried to stand up several times. However, the feeling of weakness in his limbs made every attempt useless. He fell to the ground and found it difficult to get up. This feeling made Zhao Yunfu wonder if he had been poisoned by the poisonous spirit banner. However, he had already taken the antidote and had a spell to protect his body. How could he be harmed by the poisonous spirit banner? Even so, there are still a lot of things that didn't make sense. Zhao Yendo's heart was filled with resentment, but he couldn't do anything about it. He wanted to force the poison out of his body, but the poison was like a fish swimming around his body. He simply couldn't catch it. It was even swimming around his meridians. If there was any spiritual energy gathering, it would immediately disintegrate. The poison was even using his spiritual energy as nourishment and was constantly expanding. Impossible. Zhao Yunfu's heart was constantly roaring. He simply could not accept this fact. However, things had already reached this point. Even if he was unwilling to admit it, this feeling made him feel helpless. It seemed that it was almost impossible to get rid of this nightmare. That deep sense of powerlessness made Zhao Yunfu feel that he had reached the end of the road. Nan Gongyu glanced at everyone. It could be said that everyone was very puzzled. What was going on? Everything was too strange. Although there was still a trace of blood at the corner of Xiao Yang's mouth, he was playing with the terrifying item as if nothing had happened. Thus, Nan Gongyu could not help but think, what was the origin of this Xiao Yang? How could he be so powerful? He had never even heard of such a person before, but the moment he made a move, it was as if he was a celestial being. Not only did he defeat Zhao Yunbu, but he also used some unknown method to poison Zhao Yunbu. This was as strange as it could get. You were not poisoned by the poisonous spirit banner. How is that not possible? I have to say, this little thing is quite interesting. Xiao Yang smiled. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yang had already studied this item and understood that this poisonous spirit banner was made from countless poisonous substances. In addition to the refining method, this banner had become a great killing weapon. This was a good idea, but it was still a fly in the ointment. Of course, this was only in Xiao Yang's eyes. If he could extract some of the poison from the MOE Jade Lotus and sprinkle it on the poisonous spirit banner, the effect would be doubled. When was I poisoned? Zhao Yunfu asked, unwilling to give up. Xiao Yang looked at Zhao Yunfu as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "It's those scattered lightning bolts that look harmless." Hearing this, Zhao Yunbu also seemed to despair. His eyes widened unceasingly. At that time, he thought that the lightning dragon was the killing move, but the poison it contained was the greatest killing move. This was really something that was impossible to guard against. Zhao Yunbu smiled bitterly. He had never thought that the meticulous planning he had put in for the past few decades would be completely destroyed by an unknown outsider. Zhao Yunfu was very unwilling, But since things had already come to this, there was nothing he could do. He could only resign himself to fate. Fellow Taoist Xiao is very skillful. Sun Yi cupped his hands and flattered. Now that the poisonous spirit banner had been taken by Xiaoyang, the suppression it emitted had lessened a lot. Therefore, Sun Yi had also begun to recover. However, it would still take a lot of time to force out all the poison in his body. Fellow Taoist Sun has integrity. Xiaoyang smiled. When these words were spoken, the traders felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles. It was very uncomfortable. They had no choice but to submit to Zhao Yunfu in order to survive. However, who would have thought that the guy would fall in the blink of an eye? The winner was obviously Nangong Cheng's side. Sun Yi lowered his head awkwardly. He was naturally happy to be praised by others. However, they were both smart people. Naturally, they remembered all the small details clearly. Naturally, their thoughts could not be hidden. It was also because of this that Sun Yi did not leave immediately. Of course, it was impossible for him to betray them. No matter how casual Sun Yi was, it did not mean that he had no bottom line. In order to survive, he would draw his sword against his former master. Xiaoyang did not continue to speak, and Sun Yi was slightly relieved. If some things were exposed, then it would be hard to avoid feeling a little embarrassed. At that time, everyone would feel awkward. Therefore, the best choice was to ignore a lot of things. After fiddling with it for a while, Xiaoyang kept the poisonous spirit banner in his bag. He would study it in the future. As for Zhao Yunfu, Xiaoyang did not even look at him. He was quite confident in his poison. Zhao Yunfu did not have much knowledge in this field. He was only imitating Sun Yi. At least, he would not be able to stand up for at least half an hour. Xiaoyang walked up to Nangongyu, pulled her up, and started to remove the poison from her body. Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist Xiao. Because of this, Nangongyu could continue to live and Nangong Cheng could continue to exist. Nangongyu said gratefully. Xiaoyang did not mind at all and said, "This is only a business deal. After this, we're even." After hearing this, Nangong Xiao and Nangong Yong were speechless. They initially wanted to flatter Xiao Qin. At the same time, they admired Xiaoyang for being able to help others in the face of injustice. How cool and chivalrous was that? However, the word business made them feel that it was tacky. Doing something extraordinary, yet saying such vulgar words. This really made people unable to see through him. Nangongyu smiled, looking at the young man in front of her. She was looking forward to it. Although his words were emotionless, these people were able to abide by the contract. They were obviously people with a bottom line. Becoming friends with such people would definitely bring endless benefits. However, in this world, strength was the only thing that mattered. There were very few people like Xiaoyang who would do what he said. Zhao Yunfu is still your dog. How you want to deal with him will be up to the city lord. Xiaoyang said,